Have you ever snooped through your partner's phone? My girlfriend and I have been going through a rough patch for about a year or so. We've been in a relationship for over 4 years and change. Early in our dating phase, I was still emotionally attached to one of my exes. Girlfriend found our messages and one of my ex's pictures in my phone. The pic was my ex wearing a tank top. Didn't realize it was backed up to Google Photos. This was what started the whole thing. Now I know this was wrong, but I didn't think that was a big deal. So I deleted every message of me and my ex as well as cut all ties with her because I want me and my girlfriend to be serious. I thought that was it. But then my girlfriend said she wanted to confront my ex, have a conversation over the phone, etc. She said she would feel relieved after venting what she felt about me and my ex's relationship. Sort of looking for closure. So the two of them got on the phone, but a whole bunch of drama sprouted where my ex's girl squad started tweeting about my girlfriend and she found out after stalking them. Not sure if this was my mess up, but I guess I could have convinced my girlfriend to block them, let things go, and move on with our lives. Long story short, me, my girlfriend, and ex's friend, let's call her Z, got into a group call. On the call, Z was talking crap to my girlfriend, and my girlfriend shouted back. Being the dumbass level-headed person I am, I waited for them to finish yelling to say my points. My girlfriend thought of my silence as me not defending her or being on her side. Furthermore, my ex's gang keeps on tweeting about my girlfriend and she kept stalking them. This led to a borderline unhealthy obsession to a point where she found out my ex was about to get married. Anyway, we had a rough discussion and I said that I'm committed to this relationship. I also asked if she'd be willing to stay and give it a go. She said yes. So we agreed that we'd go to therapy together. For context, my girlfriend had a rough childhood. Abusive parents, toxic household, the whole shebang. She had been diagnosed with MDD and BPD. So we decided that she should get all of her traumas and problems sorted out before we can attend a couples counseling. She did go to a few psychiatrists, but being the third world country that we live in, most of them are either rude, can't properly empathize, or straight up refers my girlfriend to be in psych ward. More later. This caused a lot of mental strain on my girlfriend, so she asked if she could quit her job because the office drama also makes things worse. So I said yes, and that I could pay her rent, food, and even give some money to her parents every month. We're both first child with poor/unemployed parents. I have a pretty good job, and I loved her, so I had no problem with it. After a bad fight and dangerous mental breakdown with self-deletion thoughts, we agreed to give the psych ward a try, but instead of being treated like a heavily depressed person with MDD and BPD, they straight up put her in an isolated room like someone with a schizo or just purely insane. So this added further to her trauma of psych treatment. So I pulled her out of there because I couldn't stand the thought of my loved one being treated like an insane person. About 6 months later, she's been doing pretty well without any mental breakdown. I thought we were doing great, but earlier this month, she told me that she had planned to air out my ex's dirty laundry to her fiancé through email. She took screenshots of harsh messages and tweets my ex and her gang directed to her. But during some mental breakdowns, she wanted to break up with me a few months ago, but after deep talks, we decided to stay together. I thought this could have been the ending, so I got on board with the plan and suggested that we should do it before our planned trip later this month. The idea is to send out the messages, then get busy holidaying to avoid any mental strain. But precisely last night, my girlfriend found out that my ex had already got married a couple of days ago. This triggered her big time. We got into a fight and she left me on red. I decided to give her some time to calm down, then I'd go to her place to sort things out. This has been like a regular pattern whenever we have a fight. Not 2 hours later, some guy, let's call him DK, who she said to be close friends with, called me on my Instagram. For context, I knew they went out together several times while we're together, but I thought that was it, and I've already said that I don't like them going out. Asked my girlfriend a few times about him and she said that they're just close friends. Anyway, DK told me to come to my girlfriend's place ASAP. When I got there, my girlfriend had already been bleeding out of her leg and knuckles and there was a broken wine bottle on the floor with DK holding my girlfriend. I went out to get some first aid kit, then come back and cleaned everything up with DK. Now I've been suspicious about their relationship for a while. But what pushed my intuition was that DK was touching my girlfriend in places where you wouldn't dare touch if you're just close friends. I cleaned out the room, wrapped my girlfriend's wound in bandages and calmed her down. Once she calmed down enough, I told DK to leave and I'll be looking after my girlfriend. My curious self wanted to know what their relationship is like. So I went through their messages and found out that they've been sleeping together. My girlfriend is sleeping and I know she's tired from the mental breakdown. Separately, I've been intimate with my girlfriend once in the past 3 months. Every time I initiate, I would get turned down. I took pictures of their messages and thought I would keep it until things get better to talk to her. But when I was headed out, she took my arm and asked me where I'm going. I told her that I read her and DK's messages. She sprung out of bed and asked me how much I know. I wanted to stop and leave, but I didn't trust her enough not to hurt herself. So I forced myself to stay. But this led into a huge fight. She said that the things my ex and her gang did to her destroyed her. She couldn't see me the same way ever again after the group call. I was brokenhearted and let my emotions get the best of me. I asked her if the attention, love, and everything I give is not enough and told her that she broke my heart. I shouldn't have been broken because my job was to help my girlfriend heal from her trauma. So fast forward to this morning, she had another mental breakdown. She kept saying that she would pay everything back, but I know her state of mind and I truly don't want anything back. I just want her to get her life together. She walked out of her place then. We took a walk and she called a Gojek, motorbike version of Uber. She said she wanted to go to the train station and disappear. So I took her phone away and told her to wait for me while I get my bike to take her anywhere she want to calm down. After I got my bike to the spot where she waited, she's no longer there. I figured she went to the nearest bus station. We need to tap a card to get in, and she was there. I rushed home, which is like 5 minutes away, to get my bus card, parked my bike and rushed to the bus station. But she's no longer there. Asked other people in the station. No one knew where she went. She only has her wallet, some ID, and some bank cards I guess. I have her phone. I spent my wedding anniversary with another girl, on accident. Last Monday I went out with an old friend, female, whom I haven't seen for ages. We were both hard-pressed to find a time to see each other, so when we finally arrived at the meeting place, we were both pretty hungry. Luckily I knew a great steakhouse nearby. So we went for 2 amazing steaks. Overall, we had a ton of fun catching up. We planned to meet for just a couple of hours, but ended up only getting back home past midnight. With a promise to repeat this sometime later. So far this doesn't sound too bad. Well, the story begins a couple of years ago, on my first wedding anniversary. You see, back then me and my wife had a couple of things planned for the day and eventually ended up starving in a random part of a city. Pondering that we actually don't want to cook today, we decided to find a restaurant. Unfortunately, we had no idea what we wanted. But while discussing that, we stumbled upon a steakhouse in a relatively hidden alley. The steaks were pricey, but it's our anniversary, right? We can go for a good meal on this day, and it turned out to be an amazing decision. We accidentally discovered the most famous steakhouse in our city and the steaks were absolutely stunning. We have been going there every anniversary since, always having a great time and meal. Since I like the story, I of course mentioned that to my friend during our meeting on Monday, that I know of the steakhouse by accident. And that it is actually really funny, because it's been actually this exact date next month when we went here for the anniversary back then. You see, I am a guy that cannot remember dates. The thing is, me and my wife had the first date and wedding 2 months apart but on the same day of the month, so it's easy to remember the day. But for the love of me I cannot remember the months. And back at that fateful Monday, I thought our first date and our wedding anniversary is only 1 month apart. And I actually remembered the date of the first date. So I believed our wedding anniversary is next month. But it was that Monday. To add a bit more to the story, this friend I have met is someone who I used to have romantic feelings for. My wife of course knows about this. Well, earlier today, my wife expressed sadness that we weren't able to plan anything for our anniversary. I asked why, since it hasn't even happened yet. And that's when I discovered that I have not only missed our anniversary, but actually spent it in our restaurant with another girl that I used to love. And to top it off, had a great time. You may be asking why hadn't we been planning anything for the anniversary? That's because my wife has been ill for 2 weeks. She is good now. My wife hasn't made the connection yet. What do I do? What happened when you accidentally sent nudes to the wrong person? One chick from my HS accidentally sent her nudes to everyone in her address book about a year after she graduated. She deleted her FB and all social media, and nobody I know has heard from her since or knows what she's doing. Accidentally sent a PP pic to my Snap story when stories were just starting. My girlfriend told me. I could see who else saw it, my sister, and 2 guy friends from high school. Immediately apologized to all 3, my sister was mortified, 1 friend laughed it off, and the 3rd friend came out and told me he was bi after. Thought I sent a PP pic to girlfriend. Sent it to some random number instead. 1 hour later, that person replies asking who it is. I explained that I meant to send it to somebody else and I fat-fingered the wrong number. They said, can I keep it? And I said it was fine with me. Never heard back from them after that. I hope they still have it, whoever and wherever they are. My wife's and mom's names start with the same letter and are next to each other on my contact list. I accidentally told my mom that I wanted to eat her punani after she got off work. My dad called me laughing his ass off thinking it was hilarious. My mom did not find it funny at all. I was flirting with my boyfriend on Snapchat and getting pretty into it when I got a message from my best friend. Seeing her name on the top of my screen, I guess I got distracted and sent the message meant for my boyfriend to her. I realized my F up when I opened her message and realized she had gotten a picture from me. Her message was her saying she was considering self-deletion and needed someone to talk her out of it. It's especially awkward because we've been in and out of having crushes on each other for years and just never happened to be into each other at the same time. So I responded to a cry for help from my best friend who had a crush on me with a nude with a seductive caption. Rest in peace.
Try and steal my child's puppy? Get your new car stolen in the middle of the night. You might not think that a quiet, innocent-looking single mom like me would be capable of revenge to this level, but it's the quiet ones that people should be the most afraid of. My entitled neighbor screwed with my kid and I made sure that she paid for it in one of the worst ways I could think of. My son just turned 10 years old and all he has been asking for the past couple of years is a puppy. My son is an incredibly sweet, smart kid and he really doesn't ask for much at all. I try to give him all I can, but again I'm a single mother and times are tough. It took me so long to be able to save for the adoption fee to finally be able to buy him a dog, but about 2 months ago we finally had the funds to go pick up a puppy from the shelter. It honestly was one of the most fulfilling days I have ever experienced as a mother. My son cried precious, happy tears when we went to pick up his puppy and I'm just so proud of him for being such a caring boy. The issue arose after we brought him home. My next door neighbor has always been kind of a condescending woman and when she saw the puppy, she started making comments. Even though she's always been rude, Out of nowhere, she started being really kind and complimenting our new puppy, saying he was the cutest dog that she had ever seen. One day when I was coming home from work, my neighbor stopped me and started making small talk. It was totally unexpected when out of nowhere, she offered to buy my son's new puppy from me. When I told her no and that my son loved his dog and would never give it up, she let out a snobby laugh and said, "Come on, I know you know that you really need the money," and she gestured to my house, which isn't as nice as hers. I was so angry at that, and I wanted to show her that I wasn't just some pushover that she could talk down to like that. My neighbor is very well off, and just recently she bought herself the latest BMW. The night after she tried to purchase my dog, I went on Craigslist and hired some guy to come steal her car in the middle of the night. He only asked for $150, and I honestly thought he was probably just a scammer or something. That was about a week ago, and to my surprise, yesterday when I was leaving for work I saw cops in my neighbor's driveway instead of her BMW. She was out front talking to them and ugly crying. When she saw me, she asked if I had seen anything. I just shook my head without stopping to talk to any of them. Once I got in my car, I had to try so hard not to burst out laughing until I got to the end of my block. So now my neighbor has no car and no puppy, and I can't wait to come home today and see her empty driveway all over again.
I regret having my kids. I regret planning my kids. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so stuck. And I don't want to feel like this anymore. When I was 15, I met a boy. We hit it off very quickly, and by the time I was 16, we had moved in together and he brought up having kids. I had massive baby fever, so I said I'd think about it. I talked to my mom. She had me at 17, and she was against it. My boyfriend told me he didn't want to be an old broken down dad and that he didn't want to be 45 taking his kids to kindergarten. This mentality spread to me, and a month later we were actively trying. We had our first at 17, and I got married a week before I turned 18. I was so happy at the time, thought everyone telling me I'd regret it later would be wrong. I'm now 22 with 3 kids, watching all my friends start their careers, go out and have fun without any responsibilities or kids in their way. I resent my parents for letting me do this. I resent my husband for wanting this for me. I resent my children for existing. I resent myself for choosing this path. I don't want to feel this way, but I can't help it anymore. I can't help but want to leave my husband and go to college, go to a party, drink a fun cocktail, hook up with somebody. I want to live the life I swore I'd never want.
Am I the a-hole for refusing to meet my half-sister who was a result of my dad's affair? Mom and Pops were married for 30-ish years. I'm 26. Always thought they were a dream couple until 5 years ago when I found out that my dad had fathered a child from an affair that he had in 2006. My mom went batshit crazy when she found out. I honestly believe her mental health cracked and deteriorated from then, and she divorced my dad and moved to the other side of the us. Essentially, I lost my mom to my dad's idiocy. She is not the same woman as she used to be. My dad had always been in this girl's life, but over the past 5 years, I guess because he had no one to keep it a secret from, he's more or less a full-time dad to her. Since the divorce, I've kept my distance from him. I'm just trying to secure my bag, live quietly and stay away from drama. He has lately started up this crusade of me meeting this girl and developing a brotherly bond with her. I told him it's just not on the cards. I have no interest in picking up a relationship with anybody, and I have my own hatred for my father's new family, and what anyone says, therapy ain't fixing that. Believe me, I've tried. It's better for my mental health if I continue to do my thing and not involve myself. It's got to a point where everyone on my paternal side is bugging me for some sort of Christmas miracle meetup. Apparently this girl wants to know me very much and is begging that she gets to meet me as a Christmas present. I've consistently told everybody no, and I'm also not celebrating Christmas with them in case they try force anything. The only person on my side in all this is my fiancé, who is the only one who gives a shit about what hurt this might cause me instead of anything else. Just wondering if he oughta for shutting everybody down over this.
What is your roommate horror story? I had a roommate in college who spent money lavishly and liked to buy clothes, wear them once or twice with the tags on, then return them. One time we were at Target doing some grocery shopping and she tried to return a few dresses she had worn. One had a large stain on it and she didn't have the receipt or tags for the others. The cashier said he couldn't take them because they had clearly been damaged. She spent the next 30 minutes crying hysterically while he tried to ignore her and check out other people. She sat on the bench outside of the Starbucks, facing the cashier, and just stared at him while crying. It was so embarrassing, and I begged her to stop and just leave with me. Eventually, I said I would go sit in the car, and she grabbed me and said, "It's not real. I'm not really that upset. I know how to cry on cue." That really freaked me out, how she stopped so suddenly to tell me that, then started up wailing again. I apologized to the security guard, who said he couldn't put his hands on her to remove her but had to insist she leave. She kept trying to get other customers to look at her and see what they're doing to me. She sat outside the store for another 10 or so minutes doing this. It was ridiculous. I couldn't apologize enough to everyone there, but I sure tried. Thankfully we only had 2 months left of living together, but I'm pretty sure that was a usual thing for her to do. Sure enough, she did it again, but in front of our dorm, after her boyfriend broke up with her. So many people were watching her from the windows and in front of the building. I was initially with her, but I felt so embarrassed by her doing that, so I went up to our room and watched through our window. Her boyfriend said something like, "This is why I'm breaking up with you," and left. She sat down there and continued to fake cry for another 15 minutes. Haven't spoken to her since I moved out, But she and her boyfriend got into a huge argument about this behavior, and she ended up stabbing the guy 5 times with a pair of kitchen scissors. What's an industry secret that isn't supposed to be known by the general public? There is no secret to low-calorie drinking. Alcohol equals calories. All light beer is just lower in alcohol. Because the amount of alcohol in a beer is relative to the amount of fermentable sugars put into it, it is cheaper to make. You pay the same for Budweiser as Bud Light despite a 8% difference. Then because it's lower in alcohol, you drink more. That means you're also buying more. This is largely why every light beer has been pushed and allowed to flourish, while the original beers are in decline. There are some differences, however. Michelob Ultra, Bud Light and Guinness are all 4.2% in alcohol, while they each contain 92, 110 and 125 calories per 12 ounces serving, respectively. Personally, I just don't see the value in paying more for less calories when you can just buy regular old Budweiser, add about 10% water and create your own watered-down beer and retain this logic. So many products created in Europe are changed to be sent to America. Mostly they just make them sweeter. This goes for inexpensive items such as Strongbow, who after finally asking themselves why they were trying to sell a dry English cider in the US, came out with Strongbow Golden Apple, which is much sweeter. The same goes all the way up to things like high-end, but not really, champagnes such as Moet, whose entry-level $40 non-vintage, NV, Imperial Brut has a higher dosage, more sugar, for the US than its European counterpart. It's not even a Brut by contemporary standards, which Americans also don't know/care about. Speaking of NV champagne, there was once a time when the proud French folk would age all of their NV champagnes to the same high standards as vintage champagnes, which must be aged at least 3 years. Then they realized Americans not only don't care, in fact they prefer it with less toasty oak. So now you're paying for a Veuve Clicquot that has been aged for half the time, yet you are paying the same amount. Also, the vodka/rum/whiskey loves to push flavors on you because up until the advent of Captain Morgan, liquors had to be 80 proof, 40%. Captain Morgan argued that because they were diluting it with flavors, it should be less. Now you pay the same amount for 70 proof, 35%, flavored spirits, or sometimes even lower for light vodkas. And those handcrafted artisan whiskeys? Produced by large whiskey mills in the Midwest and Canada, then sold to a third party to be bottled and marketed. Granted, this has always happened with blended Scotch, American whiskeys and Caribbean rums, but it's entirely different when Four Roses is making 100% of Bullet for Diageo. And if you ever want to break your lush aunt's heart, take her to Italy to the Santa Margherita Pinot Grigio wine estate sometime. Except you can't, because it doesn't exist. It comes from proprietorially sourced vineyards from wherever and then marketed as expensive. And everything else that's popular has at some point been bought out by some massive parent company and then had costs slashed to pieces right before being marketed through the roof for the same price or more. What was your most terrifying bathroom experience ever? I was in freshman year of high school and during biology I suddenly got this incredibly sharp pain in my side that had me almost to the point of tears. I also needed to pee really badly and I asked to be excused so I could go to the bathroom and hopefully the pain was just going to end with a bowel movement. As I got up to leave, walking only made the pain worse and it took me probably 5 minutes to get to the bathroom, having to take small breaks leaning against a wall or falling to the ground and hugging my knees for a few seconds. As I got to the bathroom I began to grow very nauseous. I had no idea what was happening to me and I was sweating profusely. I was trying to pee for the longest time and it freaked me out that I couldn't. Biology was my last class of the day and I had easily been in the bathroom crying for half of the class period. Eventually, the pain got to the point where I was just balled up on the bathroom floor and waiting for it to go away. I honestly thought I was going to die. I ended up vomiting until my stomach was empty and passed out afterwards on the bathroom floor. My teacher had gotten a few other teachers to look for me after school was out since I had yet to return to class and students were already on their way home. I ended up being found by the gym teacher. My dad took me to the hospital later that day and I was told that I had developed a UTI that turned into a kidney infection. Should I reveal the truth about my deceased best friend's killer to her boyfriend? About 10 years ago, my best friend was tragically unalived by a driver under the influence of drugs. The accident also severely injured her mother. The driver responsible had a history of driving under the influence and causing harm to others. Since then, my close friend, who was her boyfriend at the time, has never fully recovered from her death. He has chosen to live his life in devotion to her memory and has no desire to date or pursue romantic relationships. He distanced himself from the trial proceedings and holds the belief that the driver received a life sentence. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, I search for information about the driver. Recently, I found an article about someone with the same name as the driver but of a different age who had committed a similar crime less than 100 miles away. This news sparked fear in me, wondering if the article had incorrectly stated the driver's age, and if this person was indeed the same individual. Motivated by this uncertainty, I delved into the trial records and discovered that the driver did not receive a life sentence, but instead was given the maximum term of 20 years. My intuition had suspected this outcome, but I had avoided facing the truth. Initially, I had no intention of correcting my friend's perception because I believed it would cause more harm than good. Both of us have since relocated from the state where the crime occurred, making it highly unlikely for them to cross paths once the driver is eventually released. The current issue is that the driver has appealed for parole, and it seems likely that they may be eligible for release 6 years earlier than originally planned. I intend to file an appeal on my own, as I believe I can handle the process, but I have been advised that additional victim impact statements would greatly strengthen the case. The dilemma I face is whether to ask my friend for a statement. I am concerned that doing so may inflict further pain and shatter a belief that has helped him cope with the loss. If I handle the appeal alone and fail, I would have excluded someone who may have desired to share their testimony, which could have been impactful. If I proceed alone and succeed, he would continue living his life without additional burdens. Although this outcome seems ideal, it troubles me because personally, I would want to know and have the opportunity to speak. However, I understand that he and I have different perspectives. So, I'm seeking advice from others on what they would do in this situation, considering they are not personally involved. Would it be kinder to spare him the truth? If you were in his position, would you prefer that I handle the situation discreetly, allowing you to continue healing and living your life as you are? Or would you rather I find a way to kindly inform you so that you can be aware of the situation? I have no issue keeping this information to myself if I believe it is the best choice for his well-being and emotional health. Therefore, I'm hoping to gain insights from individuals who have experienced the loss of a loved one and can share their perspective on whether they would prefer their friends to protect them or provide them with the truth. Thank you for your understanding and any guidance you can provide.
I want the couch we have in the kitchen. I don't ever want to be in the same bed with him again. I may not think clearly, but I want a divorce. I will never feel safe with this man, and I would never love him again, I know that for certain. I will never be sure that he will protect me. I can't stay. The thing that makes me scared is that I want an abortion. It was the first thing I googled. What I have inside me is his, it ties me to him and to his mother, I want it out. While I was crying, I scratched my stomach unintentionally, and now it's all red and itching. I can't think about what is inside of me without crying in hysteria. I want out, I want to be safe. It's strange and cruel, but I don't feel bad for wanting a divorce. I will lose the future that I wanted, and all my friends, and I will have to start all over again, but I did it once when I left my birth house, and I will do it again. I feel nothing towards what is inside of me, it reminds me of his mother and it scares me. I want it out. I never thought about abortion before, never been around pregnant people much. Right now I don't feel anything. I don't know if I should move out first or go to a doctor first. I'm afraid they will lock me if they find out. For some reason, this reminds me of the time I left my parents, and my head feels clear. I am not so panicked anymore and I mostly feel numb. But I was crying a lot earlier. I guess that's all. I want to sleep and I need to go to work tomorrow. I think that is good, because I have the excuse to be out of the flat. I don't feel safe here. Thank you for listening. I have no friends to tell this to.
What is it like to have children you don't want? I can tell you what it's like being the unwanted child. I went to the dentist once in my first 17 years. I had broken my nose twice and I just had to walk it off. I never saw a doctor. I would get yelled at if my shoes wore out too quick and they were Payless $19.99 shoes. As soon as was able to drive, the dinner table was only set for 2 instead of 3 because I could get my own food now. My lunch was a bologna white bread sandwich and an apple for 10 years straight. Fast forward, I moved in with my grandma. She said she would help out with college if I helped out around the house. First few months she got me in, the dentist fixed all my teeth and I got some braces on. Second, I was a mouth breather, so I went to a plastic surgeon, fixed my deviated septum right up. She also co-signed on a car loan so I could get around. She embraced every friend that came to the house. While growing up, friends hid from my dad because he was so mean. My grandma noticed that I would get home and run to my room, and one day she told me I don't have to hide in there, I can hang out wherever I want. Americans who visited Europe, what was the craziest thing you experienced? I am from the NY/NJ area, and have seen firsthand how out of control sporting events can get. Guys, mostly, getting drunk, vandalizing property, throwing cans and bottles, fighting, etc. So when a group of friends went to Germany for Oktoberfest some years ago, we also wanted to see a soccer game. So we got tickets to see Bayern Munich versus some other German team in what, I think, was a meaningful game. Game is great. I think the score was 5-1, so lots of action. The energy in the stadium was undeniable. Fans singing, jumping around, yelling for the entire game. Game ends. Munich wins. Begin the march to the subway station. Virtually an entire stadium, it seemed, excited to go to this one nearest subway stop. There are 4, maybe 5 cops standing at the entrance steps. Uh-oh. This is going to be a huge problem. Thousands of people, lots of them intoxicated, heading toward these 5 cops at this one exit. It's going to be a disaster. Some guys start pissing on a fence within their view. What are they doing? And then, as we watched nervously, the crowd reached the cops and, just, stopped. Everyone stopped. No one fought. The guys pissed, finished up their business, zipped up and joined the queue. Cops let enough people by to fill the first train, then the rest stopped, and so on and so forth until our group went. It was incredible. That scene couldn't happen in America. What did your ex do to become your ex? My ex didn't just become my ex overnight, they effing destroyed my life and any semblance of happiness I had left. It all started when we moved in together. At first, everything was great, we were so in love, and it felt like we were building a future together. But then, things started to change. My ex became more and more possessive, always wanting to know where I was and who I was with. They even started following me sometimes, which was effing creepy, but I loved them, so I thought it was just a phase. Then, the physical abuse started. At first, it was just little things, a shove here, a slap there, but it quickly escalated. My ex would fly into rages and beat the poop out of me. I was too scared to leave or tell anyone, so I just tried to survive day by day. But the final straw came when my ex cheated on me. I found out by going through their phone, and I was effing devastated. We had been together for years, and they threw it all away for a quick F with some random dude. I was so humiliated and hurt, I could barely breathe. I knew I had to leave, but I didn't know how. My ex had isolated me from my friends and family, and I had nowhere to go. But luckily, I found a support group for survivors of domestic abuse, and they helped me get out. I left in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on my back, and I never looked back. So yeah, my ex became my ex by being an abusive, possessive, cheating piece of poop who destroyed my life and almost unalived me. But I survived, and now I'm thriving. And if you're in a similar situation, I urge you to get help. No one deserves to be treated like that, and there is a way out.
What's the most frightening thing that has been discovered by archaeologists? I'm going to go with something that is scary because it was apparently mundane. When I took an intro to archaeology course for medievalists, the instructor, who had many years of medieval digs under her belt, said that they were used to digging up cemeteries, and not usually much affected by it, but that you would occasionally find people who by their poses had apparently been buried alive and woken up and struggled before dying for real. This was common enough that it was not totally surprising, though it could never be common enough for you to get used to it. Not so much frightening. But for me, one of the most haunting things I've seen is pictures of Titanic's debris field and all the pairs of shoes, which provides evidence that a body lay there.
My substance addict boyfriend spent over $1,000 on himself and lied to me about it. I gave him a week to get my money back or else I'm kicking him out. But he'll be homeless if I do that. My boyfriend and I have been together for 7 years and we're supposed to be raising our son, but there have been times in our relationship where I've had to raise him alone. I was 19 when I started to figure things out, like working multiple jobs and finding reliable childcare. With all those jobs, I was able to build a business for myself. I now own a storefront and make more than I would have ever dreamed. My son and I now live in our dream apartment and I'm so happy with the way things turned out for us. The only problem I'd say we have is my boyfriend. He has come in and out of our lives every 6 months, barely spends time with his son, and doesn't make as much as I do, so he's always asking for money. He's my best friend and I know he's been through a lot, so I was fine with helping as long as he didn't abuse my kindness. He's had trouble providing for us in the past, and we both have a responsibility to our child, but he took a long time to actually be present. He told me he wanted to do more, though he only helped with my store, which I appreciated, but I wish he had done more for our son. I was taking him to work pretty often and it was really hard to focus and be a mom at the same time, as my job requires my full attention. So, I discussed a plan with him. He should quit his job and be a stay-at-home dad. I was making more than him and we would save money by not getting a nanny. This would also allow me to expand my business since I wouldn't have to worry about my kid at work. I was glad he agreed and he's been staying at home for 4 months now. It took that long for him to break my trust in him. It happened when he ran up one of my credit cards. He was supposed to only buy shoes for our son because he grew out of all his. I found out he spent $700 on shoes for himself. He also took $600 that was meant to help pay rent, and another $200 on weed. I was livid that he would just steal from me when I was also giving him some of the money I earned. I confronted him about all the missing cash and he said he didn't take it. I said that no one else would besides him and he asked, "What about the baby?" Guys, he's 4 years old. I told him it wasn't the effing baby smoking the devil's lettuce every week. This made me rethink leaving him with our child because I was scared that he was neglecting him. Taking care of a baby is hard work, and he's always been lazy. For all I know, he's had our child do everything around the house. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the one that cleaned the house. I told him that I was behind on my bills because he spent a lot of my money and he somehow needed to come up with over $1,000 by the end of the week, or else I would be kicking him out. He's betrayed me in all sorts of ways and I couldn't believe he would do this to me after all we've been through, after I supported him through everything, and he's seen me stress over all the work I have to do to keep my business running. He whined that he would be homeless if I kicked him out, but that wasn't my problem. He then said I still needed him to babysit, but I shut that down immediately. I had managed without him and I could continue to manage. Realistically, he was not needed and only caused more damage in our lives. He's done nothing but complain that there's no way he can give me that money, and has done nothing to get a job. He just sits around all day. He probably thinks I'm joking about kicking him out, but I'm not. It's already been 4 days and his butt imprint is on my couch. I hope my son doesn't turn out to be as immature as his father. I can't stand my son. I'm 24. My son is 7. I had him when I was 17 and I hate it. His father was a guy much older than me that I knew for barely any time at all, and things went wrong and one day he forced himself on me. My parents don't believe in baby garbage, so I had no choice but to keep the pregnancy, and they told me how happy they were for a biological grandchild, since I guess they were scared they might not have one. My older brother had come out as gay a year before, and I came out as bisexual a few months later, which I guess they took as also gay. I don't think they realized how horrible the whole situation was for me. They're not bad people, just painfully dense and emotionally unaware. Because of their pressure I felt obligated to keep the kid and raise it, and I regret it with every fiber of my being. Hell, my brother offered to adopt him. I really couldn't do it, that way I could still see him, but I wouldn't need to get his mother. But I didn't want to force that on him. He was only 21 and still wanted to live his life and seize his opportunities, and putting my brother under the same stress that I was would have broken me. So I kept him. I wish I could say, truly, that I love him, but I don't know. I can't tell if I love him or if I just feel guilty for how much I can't stand to look at him. I can't stand looking at him, and it's not even because he looks like his father or anything, it's because he looks like me. He has my hair and eyes, and my mom always makes comments about how I look so much like him when I was his age, and it makes me sick to my stomach. Because it just reminds me of how my life fell apart, of how young I was, and how any hope of a future that I love for myself is gone now. I just want to go back. I just want to be 17 again and have my childhood the way I was supposed to. Most of all, I just hate myself. I hate myself for hating my son, and I hate myself for disappointing my parents and everyone who believed in me when I was young.
Men of Reddit who proposed and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? We lived together for another 6 years until she changed her mind and told me that I should ask again. We were engaged for over a year and got married in 1991. We are still married, have 3 children, and are both still very much in love. She said yes as I had a special occasion planned, one of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top, and we were in our way to a family event and I had a ring made and everything. Then a few days later she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance, other side of the world. When I visited it would be super awkward. Eventually dad kicked me out, was flying standby and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I am happily married and am glad it never worked out. I was not in a good place when I met her and her family were super controlling. It would never have worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than expected. If you had taken your life 1 year ago, what beautiful things would you have missed out on? I would have missed out on my grandma calling me. Best surprise I had in a while. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, and is still here, but somehow still gone. I was always close to her. She took me in when my parents abandoned me, baked me cookies, bought me Christmas presents, would take me to school and so on. She called me on the phone when I moved abroad. So it's a long number, plus the country code. But when I saw her number on my phone, my heart just exploded. I thought she had forgotten who I was and I would never get a chance to speak to her again. I picked up, said hello, and my grandma said hello. Haha, she tried to prank call me. She made her voice higher and tried to change her accent. It was the cutest thing of all time. I knew it was her. I asked her if everything was okay and she said yes. I just wanted to talk to you. She asked me what I ate. I told her. We talked for about 15 minutes. I asked her if she was going to take a nap and she said yes. Right now I will sleep. I told her to have a good nap and I love her. And she said she loves me. It was the most heartfelt moment of my life and I shed a tear right after the call ended. I would have missed that moment if I took my life. It almost felt like my grandma was back, you know. Before she was diagnosed. It was the first time she called me after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's a year or so before that call. What is the saddest scene you have ever witnessed in a jail? When I first started working at this prison, not a jail, I found out about the many suicidal and self-harming patients/prisoners. One of the inmates reached out to me. I was a medical assistant, and he asked for help. Every person I told on the higher up laughed at me. Apparently they had lost many prisoners over the past year to suicide. The latest was a guy that had been telling everyone he was going to do it for months. He finally did, and no one found the body until it was hard and cold, rotting. They are supposed to be checked on every 15 minutes, and checked on by so many people through the night and day. No one checked on him or so many of the others. Everyone that runs the prison literally just laughs when I try to report these types of things, even after they laugh that guy off. The nurses and med techs really mess up medication all of the time. No one is there to watch them and they count by hand without any electronic system. Prisoners go without medications for seizures, diabetes, HIV, and mental health all the time. When they have any kind of problem and try to report it, they don't get seen for months if at all. Prisoners get sprayed in the face/body with mace if they're caught self-harming. Prisoners with asthma and lung problems do not get the proper treatment most of the time, and have to breathe in the mace/pepper spray all the dang time. It's used all day every day. They flood their own tiny cells with poop and pee just begging to have someone listen/pay attention. So many of them are there for things like marijuana and being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they get involved with the wrong people because they are hungry or scared and end up there for life. All of the guards seem to have deals with the inmates. I've seen drugs everywhere, especially at night on the ground, and even when I report it no one cares. Some have sex with guards or are used by guards. The air conditioning in the prison I worked in was broken in South Mississippi more often than not, and the prisoners are allowed to smoke. They smoke rolled up regular paper with whatever in it and it burns like crazy. The smoke and heat makes it so hard to breathe, especially in the place we called the dungeon. Because of COVID no one could see them at all, so I doubt anyone could even try to reach out and help if they could. Prisoners like my cousin that went away at 17 for self-defense and having no money for a good lawyer find out real quick that if they don't get involved in the drugs or in gangs they are going to be stuck there anyways, probably for life, due to the people around them and getting the blame. They will be hurt, unalived, or starve without gang protection most of the time. The guards and medical staff are so fake it's ridiculous. Blood everywhere. Guards don't want to write people up and fill out paperwork or beat up people and don't fill it out, So most of the blood and stuff is just there and no one asks questions. The NY Times wrote about the prison I worked at as hell on earth once, but I didn't understand until I worked there. The interviews and training made it seem like everyone cared and had each other's backs. Meanwhile, guards are sleeping with one another and prisoners are dying, and the whole place is not even fit for a dog. I keep drinking after my wife's death, and my son cries for me to stop. My wife passed away a year ago in a car accident and it has been really hard. It would be hard to move on, if not for my son. My son and I are very close. He is 16 now and mostly looks after himself. But we got into a fight a couple of days ago, and he hasn't been the same since. We were on a trip driving across the country. My son was as animated as ever. He was telling me about every little thing that came to his mind, including his thoughts on movies, fun history facts, etc. Then, a few days ago, on the 1-year anniversary of his mother's death, I went out and got plastered. I usually drink a good bit, but I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic. I do work every day and provide for my family. He greeted me when I got home at midnight. He said, "Dad, you've been drinking a lot and I don't think it's good for you, and I've been really lonely without you. I think if you stopped drinking so much that would be best." I lost my mind at him. I have no idea what came over me. I said, "Don't I look after you? Don't I take care of you? How dare you question how I relax in my free time? I pay for everything, don't I? You're acting so spoiled and entitled and bratty." He immediately started crying and apologizing, and for some reason seeing him cry set me off more. I said, "Don't cry, no son of mine is going to cry like a child, I'm embarrassed of you." I have no idea where any of this came from. I felt horrible the next morning when I woke up. I apologized and told him over and over again that I love him. He's not any of those horrible things I called him, and it's okay to cry, especially in front of me. He accepted all my apologies immediately, said it wasn't necessary. He said it was his fault for asking me to stop drinking. He said he knows I drink to deal with Mom's death, and it makes me feel better. It was wrong of me to ask, especially when it's the anniversary of her death. You did nothing wrong. I wish I could do that, so I can't fault you for doing it. He said you were right to yell at me for crying, I was being a kid. I repeated it was okay to cry, and it wasn't his fault. I made a comment that he must think I'm a horrible person, and he said no, he knows how a person acts at their worst moment does not define them. He said he knows I'm a good person. Such a great kid I have. It didn't assuage my guilt in the slightest though, especially because since that terrible night he has become a ghost in the car with me. He does not speak about random stuff anymore, seems wary to even brush up against me. I asked again if he had a problem with the drinking and he said absolutely not. I asked if he was upset and he said he promises he isn't. What's your biggest regret in life? I got my coworker pregnant and her husband thinks my son is his. I've been working at the same company for 6 years now. I started off in a department with a girl who started just 2 weeks before me, so we were basically new together. We would constantly rely on each other for help, so naturally we became close. A friendship, but there's always been a bit of chemistry. I was married when I started. She got engaged to her long-term boyfriend who also works at the company and eventually they married. My wife and I went to their wedding and everything. We eventually moved on from that department, both ending up in different departments but still keeping friendly and eating lunch together. This year we both went for promotions and got them, so we wound up working in the same department together. This position involves traveling occasionally, conferences, dinners with big clients. I'm sure you can see where this is headed. Her and her husband have been trying for a baby for 2 years now. Her husband has low sperm count and other male infertility issues. She's constantly venting to me about it. We drank too much and went back to her hotel room after dinner and we ended up having intimacy. It was nothing romantic or special. I effed her from behind and came inside of her. I instantly regretted it afterwards and we did not have intimacy again. She became pregnant shortly afterwards and told me that she thought it was mine. I didn't want to believe it, but she was positive it was. She said it will be our secret. She had the baby a year and a half ago, and it is unmistakably mine. Even as a baby, it looks almost exactly like me. Her husband is so happy to be a father, always talking about how amazing it is to be a father, asking me for tips. I'm so incredibly guilty about this that I can't bear it. I'm to the point of quitting my job because I just can't take the lie. How did you trick your entire high school? On my last day of high school, I pretended I was a substitute teacher and taught a class. For whatever reason, I decided that on my last day of high school I was going to go out in style, so I wore a suit and tie to school. When I arrived, I got a few glances and grins, and then one of my friends asked if I was dressed as one of our teachers, one who was known for overdressing often. As he asked me this, it sparked an idea. If he thought I was trying to impersonate a teacher, I wonder if lower classmen would think the same. I wondered if I could pretend to be one. The wheels started turning. I looked the part, and I had enough confidence to pull it off, and if I walked into a class that was all freshmen, there was a high probability that I wouldn't be recognized as a senior, because our social circles didn't overlap much. So as the morning bell rang, I was decided. The only thing that was missing was a class with no teacher. As I was walking to my first class, I peered in every class, looking for one with students but to which the teacher was running late. I wouldn't be able to teach the whole period, obviously, but I could run out the game as long as the teacher was late. But time was of the essence. If I couldn't find a classroom quickly, I wouldn't get any teaching time as the teacher would walk in right after me. And if I made it to my first class before I found a teacherless classroom, I'd have to go in and sit down, thus missing my opportunity. 2 rooms before my class, I found it. A class with 25 students seated quietly, and no teacher in sight. I looked up and down the halls, and saw no sign of an educator coming, so I burst through the door and started talking. If everyone would please take their seats, I'd like to go ahead and take roll. There was silence. I glanced around and saw the teacher's nameplate on her desk. Mrs. T isn't feeling well today, so I'll be subbing for her. I understand you guys were told what you have to work on, but before we begin I'd like to take roll, so if someone could please show me where the class roster is. Out of nowhere, a student says, "Aren't you a student here?" Someone recognized me, but it didn't matter. If I played it confidently enough, he would get the idea, stop talking, and the rest of the class would be satisfied with my explanation. So I stopped, took a moment to act offended and frustrated and continued. "Yeah, I get that a lot. I know I look young, but no, I am not a student, and I would appreciate it if you raise your hand to speak." They were satisfied, and shot the student angry glances for asking such a seemingly offensive question. I continued, "I understand you all have some projects you're finishing or that need to be turned in today, so I'll go ahead and let you work on those presently. If one of you could please let me know the name of the project so I can track, for Mrs. T, what you were working on, I would appreciate it." One of the overly eager students perked up and explained the project details to me. This is about 5 to 10 minutes in now, so I'm starting to wonder where the teacher is, and if I'm going to actually fill up a 90-minute period. Just then, I see her, through a window, coming down the hall. I turn to the class. "Students, if I can have your attention." They put their pencils down. "I actually am a student. Today is my last day of high school, and you've been great. Thanks for letting me sub in," and I held the door for the teacher as she walked in.
What is the scariest, most unexplainable thing you've come across in the woods? My dad used to live on a farm in the middle of nowhere. He had a huge piece of land that used to have an old farmhouse that got burnt down a long time ago. They had a medium-sized section of woods on the land, and nearby the entrance to the woods, if I took a turn, there was a small graveyard with the family of the farmers who used to live on the land, maybe 200 or so years old. There was another small section of woods that separated another, older section of the graveyard. Don't know why. One day, I was exploring as I used to love to do. My favorite was finding my way to the graveyard and then to explore further from there. Middle of the day I went. With the dog. I looked toward the section of woods that separated the two graveyard areas and I saw this huge figure. Like a human but really, really tall. Too tall to be human. It was also bright and this thing was pitch black, like it didn't even have any shadow or depth to it, it was just black. The dog barked at it, it looked like it shifted in my direction and I ran like hell, didn't look back. Just ran.
Am I the a-hole for hating my husband's sexist religion? So my husband and I both grew up Jewish, but he grew up ultra-Orthodox and I grew up totally secular. We met when I wanted to become more religious, but now we both don't identify as Jewish religiously anymore. It's also important to add here that my husband and his brother have had an extremely tense relationship for the past 10 years or so that my husband now wants to repair, but it seems like it is my husband doing all of the work and compromise and his brother doing none of it. Anyway, when someone dies in Judaism, their family does something called sitting Shiva and people go visit them for a week. Also, every night there is a prayer service that requires 10 adult Jews. Here's the messed up sexist part: the only ones who count for this prayer service are men. Adult women literally don't count as people. This is one of the main reasons we left Judaism altogether. So my husband's sister-in-law had her mother died recently. My husband thought it would be good to go to the father-in-law's house to pay our respects. I said no, since I really can't handle that environment. He said it was important to him to come, so I came. The only request I had is that we go before the prayer service and don't stay for it. Well, my husband didn't listen to me. We went too late because he got home from work late and his brother asked him to be a part of the prayer service because without him they'd need to call another man. I was giving my husband eye daggers and he literally looked me in the eyes and said sure. I got so mad that I took our car home. My husband came home later and was like, "What the F?" and I just ignored him. I feel betrayed. He knows how unsafe those spaces make me feel and that I compromise by even going there. I'm always compromising for the sake of his family and putting my own morals and ethics aside and biting my tongue. I had one request and he ignored it. So now I'm ignoring him. I even locked the door to our bedroom last night. He keeps trying to talk to me, but if the first words out of his mouth aren't sorry, I don't want to hear it. Now he's sending me a long passive-aggressive text monologue that doesn't even include the word sorry or any attempt at an apology. In fact, he thinks I should apologize to him for taking the car, which is my car. I drove there.
You're going to lie to the police? I'll go along with it, I guess. So I got into a car accident a few days ago. It was minor but mostly my fault. I was doing a K-turn out of a residential driveway on a busy street and while backing up, hit a car that was speeding to get past. No airbags were deployed and both cars were completely drivable. This accident happened about 4:45. In the car was a middle-aged father and mother with a toddler in a car seat in the back next to the door that was hit. This family does not speak English. The father got out of the car and did the immediate look at my damage woes that come with an accident. He tells me there's a baby in the back and shows me the still sleeping child. His wife immediately gets on the phone with who I believe is the police. We pull into a parking lot to get off the busy road and wait. About 20 minutes later I grabbed their hubcap out of the road and handed it to the gentleman and he opened the back door again and showed me the sleeping baby. It's now about 5:40 and the couple's niece niece and her boyfriend show up. They immediately demand money to fix the car and I told them we'll go through insurance. She asked several times if I really want to go that way and I told her there was no way I had the money to fix both cars, so insurance it is. She proceeds to call the police at that point. The aunt was on the phone with her and not the police? Fine, I'll wait even longer for the police to come then. Around 6:15 the toddler finally wakes up and starts crying. It's now been asleep for at least an hour and a half and most likely is hungry. At 6:30 the cops show up and ask the niece if the baby needs paramedics, and the niece, who didn't show up until almost an hour after the initial collision, starts to lie to the police about how the baby has been crying since the accident and to send them. I've been in a few accidents over my years as a driver and now I'm starting to smell what this really is. Insurance scam. I looked through my dash cam and was able to prove they sped through a red light, right before the driveway where I turned from. When the cop came to ask me what happened I told him my side of the events and showed the dash cam proving the light was red in the direction they claimed to be coming from. For good measure I told the police that the baby only started crying about 15 minutes prior to when they got there. The niece started screaming that I was lying. I then told the police officer if what she says is true then I'd like to make a claim against them for child endangerment. They claimed that baby was crying for the last 2 hours from the accident and never once did they call 911 for medical assistance. They called their niece to come here instead of emergency services and only asked for them after they were offered. The car seat also isn't center mounted like required by state law and should be cited. At that point the niece is calling me every name in the book like she just found I cheated on her from Jerry Springer. I then calmly tell the officer that my dashcam was running the entire time we were stopped and have it on record when the child woke up. The officer looked at her and said, "Ma'am, it's a crime to lie on a police report. Was the baby crying since the accident?" All of a sudden she now had to check with her aunt and uncle to find out. She withdrew her claim and the officer tossed out her witness statement because she wasn't an actual witness to anything. Hopefully no bullshit lawsuit comes from it.
My boyfriend quit his job and asked me for a car because I make good money. Now he's in jail because he went nuts when I kicked him out of my house. My boyfriend quit his job last year without telling me. I only found out 2 days before the rent was due. We split everything 50-50 when I asked him for his part. When I asked, he simply said he quit because he was tired of working there. Since then, I've been paying for everything, including rent, food, gas, bills, and anything he needs. I had to work 2 jobs while going to school for a while. It was hard. But I finally finished school a couple of months ago, and I found my dream job. I make enough to live comfortably, even care for my boyfriend, and still have money to save. However, I still want him to get a job to support himself because I think he needs a job as an adult. But I feel like he relies on me too much and thinks that since my job pays well, he has no reason to work. He always says, "You make good money now, so maybe you could buy me my dream car, or you should open a business for me to run." It bothers me a lot. I don't mind supporting my partner financially if a legit reason prevents him from working, but that's not the case. He spends most of his time playing games, meeting friends, or watching movies at home. I still have to do all the chores and care for our dogs. His family thinks he's been working to care for me so I can finish school, which is untrue. When I tried to talk to him, he told me I was not supportive, and now that I have a good job, I look down on him. But yesterday, I had enough. I went home with him, playing while the dishes are not washed and the house was in chaos. He then told me he needed to buy a new shirt because they have a boys' night out in 2 days. He was asking for $300. He told me his friend had recently got a new car and that I should get him one since I could afford it. I got upset and told him he could have got a car if he was working. I told him how stressful it has been for me with him not working and fully relying on me. He started the "my life is already miserable, and you're not being supportive" talk. I was sick of it, so I said I wanted to end things here, and he needs to move out as soon as possible. As expected, he got upset and threw a tantrum. He was yelling and throwing stuff around, and when he realized I was being deadly serious, he started threatening to hit and unalive my dogs. I jumped in between him and the dogs to stop him from harming them. Then he pushed me and grabbed me by my neck. I was able to get him off of me, put the dogs into a room, and called my friends to tell them to come in and call the police. I think he got scared when he saw my friends show up, so he backed down but still verbally told them to get out of the way or he would hit them, too. When the police came, they took him away and told me he wouldn't be able to come into the apartment anymore. He had to move but would need to be escorted by the police if he wanted to grab his stuff later. It was a horrible experience but it showed me I'd done the right thing. I thought that was the end of everything, but his aunt called me when she found out and tried to gaslight me, saying that he didn't do anything wrong and I was just upset, so I called the police. I told myself that I no longer had to deal with this bullshit, so I told her to leave me alone and hung up. His family would continue to harass me but stopped when I threatened to report it to the police. I continue to pay the rent and bills like I've always been. The only thing that's changed is I'm now so much happier. I'm the happiest I've ever been in years. As for my ex, he's moved in with his aunt. I got a protection order, so we are not in contact with each other.
If a president refused to leave the White House after his term was up or he got defeated, who would be tasked with removing him? The Secret Service and the U.S. Marshals are the two organizations responsible for relieving him of duty. If they were to fail, then local police, the FBI, and eventually the National Guard would be called in. But keep in mind that if he did manage to create a hostage situation in the White House, that doesn't give him any power, as according to the Constitution, all power is transferred to the president-elect at the specified time of inauguration, even if the inauguration itself never takes place. I am obsessed with my cousin. We're both guys. He's 15 and I'm 18. We are very close and his parents divorced 7 years ago and he and his mother have been living with us since then. I've always been a bit protective of him. His dad was a piece of crap, and after they moved in with us he'd sleep in my bed almost every night because he had a nightmare. We chose to share a room even though there was more than enough space at our house for him to have his own. I developed a crush on him in that time, but it was wrong, so I kept it to myself. Last Wednesday we wanted to go to the cinema together. When I got there he was talking on his phone and smiling. That was a little strange because he doesn't have any friends outside me and my friend group, and he wouldn't call any of them. When he saw me approaching, he hung up and acted like nothing happened. During the movie he kept getting texts and I tried to see who they were from. When I asked him who it was that had been texting him, he said it was only app notifications. That evening, while he was taking a shower, I went into his room to listen to him in the shower for my own enjoyment when I saw his phone lying around. I got curious, so I checked his messages. I found out that they are from a guy who goes to our school. They had been texting for over a month. They were sending each other heart emojis. When I found out, I was angry. I felt betrayed. How could he choose him over me? I have to admit, however, I'm not too surprised that he's gay because he does look and act a bit more feminine. I tried to move past this newfound knowledge, but every time I think about it I just get angry and jealous that he'd rather spend time with someone who's basically a stranger than me, who's always been there for him and is down for whatever he could get from this other guy and more. I know the guy he's dating. I didn't like him before and I like him even less now. I don't think their relationship will last and I don't want to see my cousin get hurt. I want to tell my aunt because I know she loves her son as much as I do and wants to protect him from getting hurt again. But if I did that, I'd automatically be outing my cousin to our family and that would hurt him as well. What's a mystery that no one has been able to solve? I'm pretty sure I slipped in the shower and died. I was about to get ready for a party at 6. Just before I started getting ready, one of my friends messaged me, super excited because a boy she's had a crush on for the last 4 years finally asked her out, and he was coming with her to the party. While I was texting her back, my younger brother walked into my room and asked if I could drive him to his friend's house, which I agreed to do. Then I went to the bathroom to have a shower and do my makeup. So I got in the shower, but when I went to wash my hair I realized that my conditioner was finished. I was pretty ticked off, because I'd only bought it a couple of days beforehand and it's an expensive brand. My younger sister always uses up my things, so I knew she'd used it all. She'd also trashed the bathroom, leaving water everywhere and her dirty towel on the floor. I was pissed off, and was about to get out of the shower in order to tell her off and get some more conditioner. But as I went to get out, I realized at the last second that she'd kicked the grippy mat we have at the bottom of our shower tub up. Our shower/tub is super slippery without the grip mat. So as I went to step out, my foot slipped and I fell with my neck down onto the edge of my tub. Time seemed to slow down in my head, and I remember my last thought was, wow, this is how I die? How stupid. But here's the thing, at the moment of impact, I woke up in a start, back in my bed. I know it sounds stupid and cheesy, like something from a dumb Netflix show, but there's literally no other way to describe what happened. I was lying in bed right before I got up to shower the first time, but I don't remember falling asleep. And the thing is, I've been a lucid dreamer for the last 5 or so years, and if this was a dream, it was way more vivid than anything I've ever experienced. What weirded me out though, was that the exact same friend who texted me the first time messaged me after I woke up to tell me that the boy she had a crush on had asked another girl out, and she was pretty bummed about it and didn't want to come to the party. I was weirded out that there was some similarity between that and the dream, but didn't think much of it at first. As I went to reply, my younger brother came in to ask if I would take him to his friend's house. All the blood drained from my face. He just stood in the doorway looking confused, and asked me what was wrong. I rushed into the bathroom, feeling like I was losing my mind, and went to check the conditioner bottle. I know this sounds completely crazy, but the bottle was finished just like before. And the grip mat was kicked up. At that point I went to lie back down in bed and texted my friends to tell them that I wouldn't be going to the party. How did your life change in an instant? My dad was not a good man. Period. He would beat my mom, yell at her, call her names, take inappropriate pictures of her without her consent, buy useless things instead of paying bills and other things. I'm not going to go into all of it. 1, because it isn't really necessary, and 2, there would be a lot to list. To be honest, he's sickening. I was surrounded with it my whole entire life. I didn't even realize it until I was 9. I would lock myself in my room with my mom, barricading the door with my stuff at night so he didn't come in and sneak up on her at night. One night, they were screaming like animals. I usually camped in my room, but I forgot to lock the door this time. My mom walked in, sitting on the chair I had in my room, tears streaming down her face. He shortly followed behind her. They started yelling there, too. He sat on my chair, going through my mom's phone without her permission since he believed she cheated on him. My mom jumped onto his back and he flipped her over, hitting her head on the metal bar of the bunk bed I had. I had heard them before, but I had never seen it with my own eyes until then. I walk out, and see the master bathroom door chopped down. Our house was a rental, so it made that worse. Seeing all that, I cried into the laundry room. My mom left me at the house and bought an apartment for me and her. I was scared to leave, so I stayed as she tried to get our apartment ready. I started receiving the same treatment as my mom, except he would attempt to apologize afterwards. We tried to leave multiple times before and after that, things happening in between those things, which as you can assume aren't good. Still in contact with my father, I temporarily moved to my grandmother's since we lost the apartment. After a few bad things caused by the obvious, after a year I moved to an apartment with my mom. I didn't like my dad, but he still came over to hang out. It wasn't as bad, but he still yelled. One day after hanging out and falling asleep, I woke up to see him gone. No goodbye, just a few stolen items and a sticky note. I love you, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to see you ever again. I hated him, but it still made me a little sad. But it ended up being the best thing ever. I have good grades now, I'm happy, my mom is happy with her boyfriend who treats her very well too. We don't have much currently for the most part since it's just her, but I couldn't be happier. Next month we're moving into a new house in a fancy neighborhood with clubs, pools with her boyfriend. He's paying and helping with my mom's divorce papers. We haven't been able to find my dad, but they're going to send a newspaper to see if he notices, and if not, the divorce is free. They'll charge him and backdate the child support so it'll cost him more. He'll even be put in jail for it if he gets pulled over. What's your greatest achievement under the sheets? To me, Emily and I are both the best relationship and the ultimate gaming duo. We're like peanut butter and chocolate. That's what we call each other since she's Blasian and I'm black. We're obsessed with Guitar Hero and we go crazy for what feels like hours. But there's this one song, man, you guys know it too, Through the Fire and the Flames. It's like the Everest of Guitar Hero, and we've been struggling to conquer it. So, one night, we're chilling in our cozy gaming den, eyes glued to the screen. Emily, with that mischievous smile of hers, drops a bombshell. She leans in, all secretive like, and goes, hey babe, I'll give you head and let you finish in me, and a special treat if you can beat Through the Fire and the Flames and turn off the game. I'm all ears now. My heart's racing. Reward? What kind of reward? I ask, trying to act cool even though my mind's on fire. Emily's grin widens, and she whispers, Tabs chocolates, bro, you know, the ones on TikTok that supposedly spice things up. Damn, my jaw practically dropped to my ass. Tabs chocolates? This just got hella interesting, feeling determined and horny all at once. I lock eyes with Emily and say, you're on, babe. If I conquer the beast of a song, you better be ready to unleash that chocolate magic, girl. We grab our trusty plastic guitars, fingers twitching with anticipation. The song starts, and we dive into the virtual world of rock and roll. Notes fly by like a freaking hurricane, but we're in sync, zoned in, and ready to slay this beast. Attempt after attempt, we push ourselves to the limit, fingers cramp, sweat drips, and frustration mounts, but we refuse to give up. We're in this together, driven by the promise of the ultimate reward. Then it happens, on that one epic run, the stars align, and we freaking nail it. The crowd goes wild, and we high-five like we just won the World Cup. We did it, man, breathing heavy and grinning like a couple of mad geniuses. Emily grabs my hand and leads me to our bedroom. She pulls out a secret stash of Tabs chocolates from this black and gold box with gold foiling, and it's game time. We pop those chocolate delights into our mouths, savoring the rich, velvety taste. Instantly, a rush courses through us, intensifying our desires like never before. It's like our bodies have been electrified, ready to take things to a whole new level. Inspired by the rhythm of the song that we just conquered, we decide to take it up a notch. We sync our movements, our thrusts, to the beat of Through the Fire and the Flames. It's an insane idea, but we're fueled by the passion and the energy of the moment. As the song blares from the speakers, our bodies move in perfect harmony, riding the waves of pleasure and matching the beat. It's a mind-blowing experience, the ultimate fusion of music, gaming, and our deepest desires. The Tabs chocolates have enhanced our drive, intensifying every sensation. Check out Emily's wild perspective.
I think my nurse essayed me. Last night, my coughing and chest pain were bad, so I decided to go to the ER. Around 6 a.m., I get to my room, and an older man is my nurse. He looked creepy, but I trusted him. The first thing he says and notices is my wedding band, no engagement ring, just a skinny little band. He asked me how long I've been married. I say 5. He mentions he's been married for 35 years and she has remained faithful to him, and he always tries his hardest to remain faithful to her. He also compliments my name, stating it's one of his favorites. If he was going to have another child, it would be top of his list. After writing down, came in with cough, chest pain, and checking my vitals, he moved on to my belongings. Skipping a phone or wallet, he starts with checking my sweater. In his exact words, he asks if I have a bra on. I say no. He said, "You're not wearing anything under your sweater?" I said I'm wearing a thin shirt and pulled it down so he can see. He writes sweatpants, and again asks if I am wearing undies. I say yes. He said he needs to see at least the band of my undies, so I show him. He continues and writes down my wedding band, and asks if I have any earrings in or other jewelry. I said, I have my belly button pierced, he said to show him. I do. I then tell him that I do also have my nips pierced, thinking he would just write it down. But instead, he says he needs to see, so I show him the one closest, and he mentions he needs to see both, the other one too, so I do. To what I think, stay consistent, he asks me if I have socks on, and to show him, so I do. He also then writes down my water bottle, phone, and wallet. Laying down, my pant leg was coming up, and he noticed some scratches and asked what they are from, and I just said shaving, and luckily my mom walks in to visit me around this time. He asks if I have any other scratches or bruises he needs to be aware of. He left and immediately I started to feel sick about our encounter. I ended up getting the nursing supervisor, who was very kind, and encouraged me to report, giving me a phone number. She removed him from my room and apologized profusely.
Cheat on me? Don't expect me to pay for that expensive brand new car. After I found out that my wife was cheating on me and only thought of me as a sugar daddy, but still wanted to continue our relationship. It sent me into an anger that could only be released through revenge. I told her that she had 2 options regarding this car. She could either get a loan to purchase this car off of me, or I'm taking the car back. I'm not going to pay $380,000 after interest for a car for you now. So she decides to leave me for her new boyfriend that she was cheating on me with. This guy was the absolute scum of the earth. He lived with his grandma, in her basement, playing video games all day while his grandma does all the work around the house. Oh, and did I mention he was unemployed? 6 months later and I had forgotten all about her and that scumbag, until she comes crawling back to me saying that I have him the father to her newborn child, so I tell her go get your boyfriend to take care of it. It's not my problem, so she replies I'm going to sue you and make you pay child support. I knew that the child couldn't have been mine because I was always very careful, so in the end it was just going to be a funny story. That was what I thought until I had a court notice for evading child payments. The next thing I knew was that I was sitting in a court jail cell awaiting to be moved to an actual jail. After 2 weeks of going insane and enduring the horrors of jail, I was getting close to ending it, but just then, a guard came and unlocked my cell. He said that your case was overturned after they realized my ex and her boyfriend's father faked the data and results so that I would go to jail. Karma hit them like a bus, and now instead of me in jail, it was my ex. I got my life together, but I couldn't help but feel bad for them, because as a millionaire the child support money wouldn't have meant anything. Then again, Thet got what they deserved. Do you agree? Buying a weighted blanket from Amazon was the worst decision I've ever made. You've heard of them. They started as a tool to help calm autistic people and people with anxiety and insomnia. Over the past few years they've grown into a popular household item, and with good reason. They're comforting. We'd pay just about anything for some comfort. Do you ever notice how that's most of what we spend our money on now, us single guys? Why do we constantly crave to be comforted? My life wasn't particularly uncomfortable. Not then. I had finally gotten back track with reality after the disappearance of my wife and kids 2 years ago. I'd sold our little house in the suburbs, gotten a cheap apartment close to my job, attended all the therapy appointments the police and caseworkers recommended, and gone back to work. I still couldn't sleep for more than an hour or two a night, even with the medications they gave me, but that was okay. The worst of it was over. Shock and grief can only last so long. I got one anyway, ordered the thing off Amazon. In queen size, like all my bedding, even though my queen no longer slept in it. It arrived ridiculously late. I'm a Prime member, and I selected the free 2-day shipping. But it at least had gotten there, so I didn't send a complaint, despite the state it was in after its long journey, not in the familiar smiley cardboard box, but in a shapeless lump haphazardly placed halfway on my front doorstep, halfway in the parking lot. It had been clumsily wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string, and possibly kicked the whole way here, from the look of it. It's like a quaint, rustic thing, I announced, to nobody in particular, as I dragged it into my apartment. A present from Grandma, back home, on the ranch, but even talking to myself couldn't convince me. It looked like a bomb, delivered straight off the set of an action movie. The package was beaten up, stained, and the rough jute string was frayed and nearly falling apart. It looked singed in several places, too. It took me 2 hours, 3 gin and tonics, and a hearty microwave dinner to work up enough courage to actually open the thing. The blanket was bundled into a poorly folded cube, held together by another length of the same string that had bound the paper. I wasn't impressed with its packaging, but the blanket itself looked alright, plush, quilted blue microfiber with thick seams, and felt like it was the right weight. It smelled normal, you know, the clean but vaguely chemical-ish odor new blankets have. I checked the tag, wondering if I ought to clean it, but the ink was smeared and blurry. It seemed risky to throw it in the washing machine without knowing the correct settings to use, so I just threw it over my duvet and went about my business. At around midnight I decided to give it a try. I had nothing left to lose. I'd spent hundreds of dollars on my bed over the past few months. The newest and best quality memory foam adjustable cooling mattress, 1,000-count Egyptian cotton sheets, customizable filling pillows, and none of it had brought me a single good night's sleep. Honestly, I expected the same to happen that night, but it was fun to pretend. I slid between the cool sheets and pulled the blankets up over me. The new blanket was a bit lumpy, but I knew from reading reviews that this was normal due to shipping, and would smooth out over time. The weight was immediately noticeable, and to my surprise, I felt comforted. When I closed my eyes, I imagined my youngest two had crawled into bed with us, and were laying on top of me, suppressing giggles as they tried not to wake me up. An artfully folded section of the blanket at my back became the familiar bulk of my wife beside me, and when I opened my eyes again it was 10 in the morning and I was late for work. I've never been so thrilled to receive a write-up. That weird chemical smell didn't really fade, though, and gradually it became more noticeable. By the end of the week I could smell, or imagined I could, the strange, neutral odor on my skin, even after a shower. By the end of the month, it had become unbearable. I took it to a dry cleaners, thinking that I'd been lazy because I was so enamored over my renewed relationship with sleep. I was ready for the elderly Korean woman behind the counter to judge me over the stink. I had my excuses rehearsed. Work was crazy, I'd had it in my car and forgotten, and I'd had Indian food for lunch and forgotten the leftovers in my car over the weekend, which had amplified the smell, but I didn't have a chance to recite this story. She only waved a handheld metal detector over my blanket and said, "Filling wrong. Can't clean. Try spray with Febreze. You can get on Amazon." I couldn't imagine what about the filling could be wrong, and I told her so. Sure, it was still a bit clumpy from shipping, but Amazon had listed the filler as polypropylene, and all the reviews recommended dry cleaning. Metal, she explained, then shooed me out the door with 20 pounds of smelly quilt in my arms. Another month of beautiful, comfortable sleep went by before I couldn't live with the smell anymore. People had begun to comment on it at work. Megan, my manager, had tactfully suggested I check my laundry machine to see if maybe a rat had gotten in there and died or something. That was my last straw. I came home determined to get rid of the blanket and buy a new one. But you know what happens when you lose your entire world, with no answers? You start to cling to things. You hoard them. because you can't lose the comfort they bring you. I tried 6 dry cleaners before I found one who spoke enough English, through a heavy Boston accent. But you can't have everything, to explain it to me. Sometimes they fill these with glass beads, he said. The factories that make the beads, they'll lose a screw or some metal filings in the batch, and it all goes into the blanket. Machines in factories, you get me? Yeah, so what you can do is cut the seam a little and dump the balls into a bucket or the bathtub or something. Throw the blanket in the wash, hang it up to dry. Then you just pour them back in and sew it up. I told him I didn't know how to sew. You can get a funnel off Amazon for a few bucks, he said, and shrugged at me in a particularly apathetic sort of way before turning back to a pile of stained panties. I did exactly that. They took a week to ship it, which was annoying, but it was a bank holiday that Monday, so the delay made sense. Armed with my funnel and a bucket, I pulled the edge of the blanket over the bed and cut a tiny hole into the seam near the corner. I expected the beads to come pouring out in a clattery flood as soon as I dropped the corner into the bucket. Instead, there was a single, loud thump as a lump of something metallic hit the plastic. I peered into it and saw a gold circle. A wedding ring with a fingerprint carved into it, and an inscription on the inside that I couldn't see because a chunk of meat and bone were still inside it, but I knew what it said. It said, "To love's eternal glory." It was my fingerprint on the band. My mind went blank and I lost control of my legs, forcing me to sit heavily on the edge of my bed. The motion tugged the blanket over another few inches, and more of the filling came out. This wasn't a flood, it was more of a heave, like the blanket was vomiting up pieces of crumbling, dry flesh and bone. Like a cyst being squeezed, thick clumps of horribly recognizable stuff squirted out into the bucket. My oldest son's teeth clattered loudly against the sides, and I saw flashes of silvery fillings from the cavities caused by gum disease he'd inherited from his mom. There was a scrap of almost bleached white Hello Kitty Band-Aid wrapped around a tiny knuckle joint, and I remembered how my daughter had scraped her finger knocking loudly on her brother's splintered bedroom door, and how she'd smiled through her tears when she saw the special, fun Band-Aid her daddy had put over the scratch. I'd been sleeping for 2 months beneath the heavy weight of 1,000 mummified pieces of my wife and children's bodies. The cops couldn't trace the package, even though they tried. The security cameras in my apartment complex showed an unmarked brown van with no license plate, which dumped the package directly from the window onto my front step. There was nothing to track. Amazon's lawyers provided evidence proving they'd packed and shipped the correct, boxed and labeled, blanket. Let me be fair to them, I must say that they offered me a prompt refund, in-store credit, but I won't be buying anything off Amazon ever again. I've gotten rid of my Echo, that was the first thing I threw out, along with all my new bedding, and I canceled my Prime membership. Just for good measure, I threw out my smartphone and smartwatch as well. Amazon and smart technology are convenient and that's great, but it's not worth the risk if things like this can happen. It's the only possible explanation. After all, how else could they have found the bodies? I'm thinking of cutting off my best friend, because she can't stop bringing up my ex-girlfriend to my fiancé. My, 29 male, best friend Jess, 29 female, keeps on mentioning my ex, 29 female, in front of my fiancé, and I am thinking of cutting her off. I want to know if I am overreacting, or if Jess is in the wrong. For context, Jess and I went to the same high school and the same college. We were friends in high school. However, since we both went to the same out-of-state college, we became best friends since then. We have always been there for each other during the best and worst times. However, things have always been platonic, and she is more like a big sister to me, who made sure I stay on the right track. I have only been in 2 long-term relationships so far. One was with my ex Emily for 7 years. We met in college and dated all throughout our college years. Emily and Jess also became good friends too. After college, Emily and I just grew apart and had different goals in life. I became boring after college as I was working on my PhD while working a full-time job. Emily broke up with me as she wanted to party on weekends, while I was home studying. I was heartbroken, but I don't think I ever blamed her or had resentment towards her, as I understood my decisions were selfish and should not hold her back from having the best life. Jess always stood by me and comforted me during that time. Jess and Emily were good friends and Jess always kept on telling me that Emily loves me and will be back one day when I am ready. I foolishly held on to that hope and stayed friends with Emily. That was until I met my fiancée Yang. After I finished my PhD, I got a nice job in a big tech company. Yang joined our team a year after me. We started going out for drinks and dinner and we started dating seriously pretty soon. We are happy together and financially in a great place. Needless to say, I stopped talking to Emily after I started dating Yang. I proposed to Yang a year after we started dating and got engaged last year. Jess has been acting weirdly since we got engaged. One of the first things she said to Yang after we got engaged was how I had planned the same thing for Emily, proposing on a local hiking trail. It was a bit off-putting that she was bringing up Emily, whom I broke up with almost 5 years ago, on such a happy occasion. However, Yang asked me to not spoil my mood, as she felt Jess was just commenting on how I had that plan in mind for years. Since then, every time we meet, Jess without fail brings up Emily and how the things I am doing are all the things I had planned with Emily. This happened when we bought a house, planned for vacations, etc. Jess always starts with some nostalgic story and then brings up how Emily and I were so happy together. She is still good friends with Emily and keeps giving me updates about Emily and how great Emily is doing at work when no one is asking for it. It felt like she was painting a rosy picture of Emily to Yang, and telling Yang that she would always be second to Emily. Yang told me Jess's comments bothered her, and I also felt the same. I have brought this up with Jess many times and asked her not to do it. However, she says she will try, but since I dated Emily for 7 years, she would be part of many stories from the past. Also, she asked me why talking about Emily bothers me and if I still have feelings for her. I have reduced hanging out with Jess. However, she is close with my mom and is always invited to all our family parties and holidays. I talked to my mom and sister about this and they feel I'm overreacting. They feel Jess is just telling stories, and since the stories are mostly from college days and later, Emily will be a character in the story. They also feel I should not be bothered by Jess mentioning Emily since we broke up a long time ago. I feel that it's disrespectful to Yang, as she doesn't need to hear about all the fun Emily and I had when we were together and how we were planning to get married. Is it just me, or is Jess truly acting out of line? Update 22 days later. The last month has been nothing but crazy and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened so far. After my post, I decided to talk to Jess and gave her an ultimatum not to speak about my ex Emily again. I know Jess and Emily are still friends, but I was uncomfortable of her comparing my fiancée Yang with Emily all the time. I broke up with Emily 5 years ago, and she is nothing but a faint memory in my past. Jess kept on defending herself and telling me that I was with Emily for most of my adult life and it's hard to tell any stories from the past without including her. She also blamed me for being emotionally childish and just forgetting about Emily when she was with me for 7 years. Finally, Jess agreed that she will not bring up Emily in front of Yang, and I should also not treat Emily as she does not exist since she is still Jess's friend. I informed Yang about our conversation. Although she was appreciative about it, she said I did not need to do it and she knows how much I love her, and every time Jess brings up my Emily, she feels sorry for Emily that she let a guy like me go. Yang went to visit China 2 weeks ago for a month as we plan to get married in her hometown. She is taking care of her shopping as well as preparations for the wedding. Jess invited me to her house that Friday for dinner as I was home alone. I am also good friends with her husband, and we were all just chatting and drinking in the living room. Around 7:30 p.m., the doorbell rang, and Jess excitedly went to open the door. To my surprise, it was Emily at the door. She was all dressed up as if she were ready for a date and came in. I had not seen her in person for almost 3 years and I was shocked to see her. She sat down and started making small talk with me. I was extremely uncomfortable and went into the kitchen to talk to Jess. I was angry at her and asked her what was going on. She kept on telling me that it's been 5 years since the breakup and to get over it and be nice to Emily. She said Emily was excited to meet me and she thought we were all adults and could have one fun evening together. We had a fight and I told her that she should not have invited Emily after our conversation the other day and I do not want to be friends with her anymore. I went into the living room and politely excused myself and told everyone that I had a work emergency and had to leave early. Emily looked sad, but I genuinely felt uncomfortable to be made to hang out with my ex without my consent. I came home and called Yang. I have never seen her more furious, and she told me she is not comfortable with Jess anymore as she has some agenda that we do not know about. It's different to talk about Emily, but to invite her without consulting is not okay. I also felt the same and I called Jess the next day and told her that she crossed a line, and I was terribly upset with her. I stopped taking her calls and ghosted her. I also told my mom and sister about the whole incident. Last Sunday, my mom called me for lunch. When I got there, I saw Jess was already there. I told my mom that I do not want to talk to Jess and can't stay. However, she asked me to sit as they all wanted to talk to me. I have a glutton for punishment and decided to hear them out. My mom started with how Jess has been there for me all these years and only has my best interest at heart. She kept on telling me that they are the 3 people, mom, sister, and Jess, that love me the most. Jess started saying how she felt that I was making a big mistake and not having to hear what Emily had to say. She told me that Emily was my first love and Emily is now ready to settle down and we can pick up where we left off. She reminded me how broken I was when Emily left me and how life is giving me a second chance. My sister also chimed in and said how they all liked Emily more than Yang and how we both looked so great together. Finally, my mom started saying how our culture was so different than Yang's culture, and it is hard for them to relate to her. I asked them in what way, and my mom said that they did not understand what Yang says sometimes and have nothing in common with her. Then my mom asked me to think about how Emily and I would have such wonderful looking kids, while if I marry Yang, our kids will look so different. I started getting their drift and I probed more. My mom told me how our kids would look Asian with small eyes and not like any others in the family. I asked my mom if she cared about my kids' looks more and not about how smart they will be since Yang has a PhD. She blew it off, and I realized she just did not want me to marry Yang because she was Chinese and not white. My mom told me to forgive Jess and my mom asked Jess to talk to Emily on my behalf and asked her if she would be interested in getting back together with me. My mom was adamant that since I loved Emily so much, I should be happy and pick up things where we left off as that is the best for everyone. I have never been so angry and may have said a lot of unkind things to all of them before I left. I am so depressed right now. I not only lost my best friend, but also am not sure how I can move on from what my mom said. My mom and sister raised me and that is the reason I'm where I am today. However, I cannot get over how racist they are being and how they were just pretending to like Yang all these years while actively working on breaking us up. I have been so shocked that I have not told any of this to Yang so far. I might wait for her to come back next week and talk to her in person. Again, thanks everyone for all your messages on the last post as they helped me a lot to think through the situation. My life is more messed up than I could imagine, and I cannot imagine how dejected Yang will feel after hearing all this. As an interviewer, what question has ruined a perfectly solid interview of a candidate for you? We were interviewing for a senior trader on our desk. It was a small desk, only 3 people. We needed the 4th. In comes this guy, very experienced, with a good resume. Everything about him looks good. We are very excited. At the time, I had 3 standard interview questions. All 3 were simple, but each of them had a catch. The idea was that you get to have a conversation with the interviewee about the catch, and through that you find out what they know and what they don't, how they solve problems, and how they think. But as simple as the questions were, nobody ever got all 3 right. I even once said that if anybody ever gets all 3 without help, they can get whatever they want from me, job, money, my firstborn, anything. Most people never even got to hear all 3 questions. You can easily spend an hour on just one or two of them. So I ask this guy my first question, and he sees right through it. Gets the catch, answers the question correctly. Wow. Good start. I never had that before. I ask my second question. Same thing. He spots it, gets it right. Man. This guy is good. It's been less than 2 minutes, and he's dealt with 2/3 of the interview. I am starting to feel inadequate. Who am I to even be asking this guy questions? So I ask the third question. It's a simple question about how to hedge some position. But the wording of the question makes it sound like he has to be on the receiving side of some swap, while in fact he has to be on the paying side. That's the catch. And he immediately gets the right swap, but he wants to be on the wrong side. He wants to receive. Well, no big deal. Everybody wants to receive. Now we get to have a conversation. I ask, are you sure you want to receive? Do you want to look a bit more closely at the cash flows? Yeah, I'm absolutely sure. I don't have to look at the cash flows. Okay, but it isn't quite as simple as it looks. Have a look at the cash flows, see if they really match up. No, I don't need to look at the cash flows. I'm right. Well, you are almost right, but not quite. You should really look at the cash flows. No, I don't need to look at the cash flows. I should receive. End of story. So this goes on for a while. I am begging him to look at the stupid cash flows. He refuses because he is sure he is right. I even tell him he should really be on the opposite side of the swap, but he says he doesn't. And he doesn't need to look at the cash flows. And this keeps going. And going. My last attempt. Okay, so say you do it your way. You do the swap, you receive, you book it in your system, and the system shows that you are not hedged. In fact, you just doubled up. What do? Then the system must be wrong. Because I'm not. Seriously? So I end the interview, and I give my feedback to the others on the desk. The guy is really smart, and really knows his stuff. But he is a walking time bomb. It's just a matter of time before he gets something wrong. And as soon as he does, he will blow up the entire desk. Or worse. We didn't make him an offer. Because of how he answered that one question. And he was a great candidate, head and shoulders above everybody else. The story isn't finished. A year or so later, there have been quite a few changes. Some things were reorganized, our desk is pretty much gone, and we all need new jobs. So I got invited for an interview at a medium-sized bank. And who walks in to interview me? Why, none other than him, Mr. I don't need no cash flows. He remembers me and my question. He admits he thought about it, and he realized he got it wrong as soon as he walked out of our building. We laugh about it, we have a good interview. But I wasn't offered a job there. You could almost say that one question eliminated 2 candidates, a year apart. And it was only asked once. The unexpected truth about my husband's affair. At 25 years old, I discovered my husband's unsettling secret in the most surprising way. With 4 years of marriage and 2 kids together, I grew suspicious when he frequently claimed to go fishing but never brought back any catch. One day, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to secretly cut the string on his fishing rod during one of his trips, wanting to see what was really going on. Suspicious of his behavior, I took matters into my own hands and discreetly placed an air tag in his car, arranging for my mom to look after the kids. What I discovered left me devastated. I found him at a motel 60 miles away, and shockingly, his best friend's wife's car was also in the parking lot. It was an agonizing realization that he might be having an affair with her. Filled with anger and about to stomp inside when I felt a hand on my arm and I spun around. Standing there was Jenna, the wife of my husband's best friend. Turns out her husband borrowed her car and she also tracked him down here, and she too shared the same suspicion about our spouses. Together, we strategized and managed to coax information about our husband's room from the motel front desk through a small bribe. As we approached their door, we couldn't help but overhear giggling from inside. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Jenna wisely stopped me from impulsively confronting them directly. Returning to the front desk to borrow the room key, we encountered some resistance, but thanks to Jenna's quick thinking, we managed to obtain the key. Upon opening the door, we were shocked to find around 14 men from our neighborhood, all husbands with wives, engaging in explicit activities with each other. Angry and hurt, Jenna and I demanded a divorce and full ownership of everything, including the house and kids. Threatening to expose their secret, we successfully negotiated our terms, and they silently agreed to everything we asked for. 5 years have passed since that fateful day, and the memory of finding him in that room still haunts me. I want to start calling my adoptive mom Mom instead of her name. My bio parents put me, 15 male, up for adoption when I was born, so I was always in foster homes until I was 12. I had a teacher, Janice, 33 female, who was my homeroom teacher. Janice learned about being a foster kid and wishing I had a family. Janice had also been a foster kid growing up, and so long story short, she became my foster mom and adopted me. Janice is the best mom I could have ever asked for. She has been unbelievably kind and loving to me, and I adore her. The problem is that I don't call her mom, I call her Janice. I want to start calling her mom but have no idea how to without making it awkward. Please help me, internet strangers. Update, so, I was not expecting this big of a response. Thank you for responding, some of the ideas made me tear up. Anyways, this morning, I went to Janice, and I said, "Good morning, Mom." She just looked at me and started crying, then came over and hugged me and kissed my forehead. I hugged her back, and she said I could call her whatever made me comfortable and that she loved me more than anything. I just replied with, "I love you, Mom." So yeah, hope this update makes someone's day because it certainly made mine. Have a great day. Am I the a-hole for refusing to consider stopping our divorce after my ex admitted her psychic friend lied about me having an affair? I met my wife Rona when we were in college together. I made the obviously terrible assumption that the fact she was in post-secondary education meant she had a modicum of common sense. We started dating our senior year and after job hunting settled on moving back to her hometown after graduating. We found an apartment and lived together for 2 years before getting married. All good so far. At our wedding, I met an old friend of hers, Anna. She offered to read my palm since she was part gypsy. Weird. I am in construction and I know a few people from that group and they call themselves Roma. Whatever. Anna only comes to town every once in a while. She lives in NYC so she doesn't have time to visit since she has an exciting life there. She makes costumes for plays and cosplayers. So we see her maybe 4 times over the next 2 years. The last time she came was Labor Day last year. And that's when it got weird. All of a sudden Rona starts acting oddly. She starts checking in on me at work, coming by when I'm working late, asking to use my phone because hers is almost out of power. That sort of thing. She finally comes out and accuses me of having an affair. I thought she was joking so I laughed and say that I was not. This sets her off like a Roman candle. Because Anna told her I would laugh it off when Rona came for the truth. I laughed because it was ridiculous. I barely had time for a relationship with my wife and my job. I am home all weekend long. When I go golfing her brother is almost always either in my foursome or at the club. And most important of all, I love my wife. I wouldn't do anything to harm her. And yet she takes the word of Anna the psychic seamstress over mine. She asks me to leave our apartment. I say no because I have nowhere else to go. So she leaves and moves back with her parents. They think she is nuts too. I spent the next few months working and trying to convince her that I was not cheating and that I wanted her to come home. I don't get invited to Thanksgiving because it would be awkward. I didn't even stick around for Christmas. I went home to see my family. They have been following all this stupidity without commenting until then. At Christmas they had an intervention. They said my wife was having a break from reality and that she wasn't coming out of it. My dad told me to give my head a shake, which he only does when I am being monumentally stupid. When I got back I went to a lawyer and started my divorce. That was in January. Finally at the beginning of April Rona calls me to talk. I say that we should talk through lawyers. She starts to cry and I agree to meet her in public if she will allow me to record our conversation so I can give a copy to my lawyer. She eventually agreed. Turns out she and her parents hired a private detective to find my affair. 6 months and a huge bill later, zero evidence of an affair. She finally believes me and wants to come home. I told her that our lease was up in July and I already found a job in Denver near my family. She says she would come with me. I respectfully declined. I told her we just weren't right for each other. The truth is I do not want to have my offspring share DNA with this dingbat. Anyway, I am moving ahead with my divorce. I am gutted that she took her friend's psychic vibrator over mine. Her family has approached me several times. The last time her dad offered to front us a 25% down payment on a house if I agreed to go to marriage counseling instead of just leaving. I politely declined. I cannot be bought. Rona is now depressed but I see no way of ever trusting her again. She is young enough she can marry again and wreck some other guy's life. What do the rich buy that the poor don't even know about? My friend is a personal assistant for this multi-billionaire and he tells me how things are just wildly different for them. The specific example he used was how things work when these people want to go on a trip and give any notice at all to their employees. What happens is that an advance team gets sent ahead by a few days to scope out the rented/bought location and report back exact dimensions for closet space, drawer space, etc. People back at the home go through the clothing, jewelry, etc., and draw up a priority list which is sent to the advance team. The advance team then spends the next 2 days purchasing the list of items. Entire wardrobes, jewelry sets, makeup kits, bathing supplies, etc. Anything they cannot get, not enough time, or is one of a kind like the family heirloom watch the rich dude wears every now and then, is relayed to the house team. The family schedule is arranged such that the moment the family leaves the house on the day of travel, a whole team of people rushes through and packs up all the remaining items. Only after the family leaves, you wouldn't want to deny them access to their items for even a few seconds, which are then sent ahead to the airport while the family has a lunch or something somewhere. Upon landing, their luggage takes one route, direct, and the family takes a similarly indirect route, unless otherwise directed, such that by the time they get to the location all of their items are not just unpacked but in their proper organized locations and ready for use without any of the advance team ever being visible to the family. What happens when the family leaves the location? The same situation in reverse, but quite frequently all of the repurchased items are just disposed of in some method. It's just easier, if not cheaper, to rebuy them each time the family goes somewhere if they aren't traveling to too many different locations in quick succession. My girlfriend overheard my family talking badly about her. My girlfriend Sammy and I have been together a bit over a year. She's absolutely wonderful, smart, attractive, driven, educated, kind and goofy. She's everything I've ever wanted and up until last week, I thought my family felt the same way. Last week I went to my parents' house for dinner. We get together as a family a few times a month and it's been a tradition with us for years now. Sammy usually joins us for these dinners, but had work obligations. I told my family she wouldn't be joining us that night. Halfway through dinner I got up to go to the bathroom and Sammy texted me that she was outside. She got off work early and came over to hang out. She would have normally walked in, which is normal, but she needed help bringing in some gifts. Sammy is leaving tomorrow for a work trip and a personal vacation to see some friends. My brother and sister, twins, have their birthday next week, and my girlfriend had gifts for them. At this point, my family had no idea Sammy was there. We walked inside and headed to the kitchen and we overheard my family talking. My sister was saying that she was glad my girlfriend was gone because she couldn't stand a family night being ruined by my girlfriend being annoying. My brother and other sister agreed about how annoying and awful my girlfriend is. My dad made a comment about how they should be nice to Sammy, and my mom chimed in with, "Sammy is nice and all but I can't believe OP likes how big she is. He can do so much better." My family, even my dad, Agreed, and my sister piped up that I was dating down because I'm still rebounding from my last girlfriend, which was 5 years ago. I was floored. My family has always been so nice to Sammy and I've never heard them talk badly about her. I've never heard my family say mean things about anyone. To be honest, Sammy walked into the kitchen and dumped the presents on the counter. She was crying and mumbled something about happy birthday and then took off out the door. My family looked shocked and a bit embarrassed. I asked my family what the F was wrong with them and didn't stick around for an answer. I went after Sammy. She was in her car crying. Now, Sammy is usually tough but family is super important to her. She has no family aside from an alcoholic dad that she doesn't have any contact with. My family was like her surrogate family and something she always wanted. She was overjoyed when my family welcomed her and invited her to family events. The presents she brought my sister and brother were paintings she had spent many hours working on. And yes, she is bigger, but I prefer thick girls. Always have. To me she's gorgeous and exactly what I like. But even then, she's lost about 40 pounds since we started dating. I would love her at any weight and I'm proud of the work she's done. I have no idea what they mean about her being annoying. She comes when she's invited, usually brings baked goods or beer. She's taken my family out to dinner multiple times and is extremely generous with them. She's even become the go-to babysitter for my sister and her 2 kids, and she helped my brother get a job in her company. She pushed really hard to get him hired and put her professional reputation on the line. She's never asked for repayment or holds it over anyone. She even does the dishes when we come over for dinner. The thing that makes this even worse is I was planning on proposing to her in the next few months. I had planned on asking my sisters to come with me to pick out her ring. Now, Sammy hasn't said much about it and hasn't talked to me much about this incident. She has always wanted a family and she doesn't understand why my family doesn't like her or what she's done wrong. She said she'd talk to me more when she gets back from her trip. I don't want to lose her over this. I would take her over my family. Sammy hasn't been her usual cheerful self this week and I've caught her crying more than once since this incident. I try to comfort her but she tries to play it that she's fine. At this point, I have no idea if I even want them in my life. All of them have reached out to me with weak apologies full of justifications. I asked my mom if she had apologized to Sammy, and my mom said I could pass on the apology. To be fair to them, all of them do feel bad about what happened and seemed extra embarrassed about this, but no one can give me exact reasons why she's annoying or how she's ruined family nights. My dad is the only reasonable one that has offered to apologize to Sammy directly. What do? I don't want to get rid of my family, but Sammy matters more to me at this point. I want Sammy to know I'm fully in her corner and I don't want her to feel guilty if I have to cut out my family. Update. First off, Sammy and I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We spent it out of town in a small skiing town. It was a great weekend and we spent a lot of time talking and discussing what to do about my family. Sammy was still pretty hurt over the matter but was adamant that I shouldn't cut all ties with my family. I told her that all depended on my family. My mom was in denial that I wouldn't be coming to Thanksgiving. After my last post, I let her know Sammy and I wouldn't be attending. She brushed it off until the day before Thanksgiving when she called to make sure I was bringing pie. I reminded her I wouldn't be at dinner and she broke down crying. She told me she was sorry for hurting Sammy and would like the chance to apologize. I let her know she'd have a chance after Thanksgiving. After we got back from our Thanksgiving trip, my parents came over for dinner. I had okayed this with Sammy. She thought my parents deserved a chance to make this right and frankly, I think she really wanted to mend things with my family. Dinner was awkward, to say the least. My dad started out by offering Sammy a genuine apology. He told her he was extremely embarrassed and genuinely wanted to make things up to her. They had a nice chat. The talk with my mom, well, that went okay. My mom cried through most of it and tried to reinforce that she was very sorry. I couldn't tell if she was sorry or just upset that I was taking Sammy's side. I don't think Sammy was convinced either. A few days after dinner, my mom called Sammy and asked her to lunch to talk by themselves. Several comments in my last post mentioned that my family probably felt Sammy was annoying simply because they felt intimidated or projecting their own issues on her. I think that was spot on. Sammy went to lunch with my mom. They had a very long, good talk about everything. She said my mom felt jealous that Sammy was so educated and had the chance to get an education. And Sammy admitted to being jealous that my mom has a big family. Sammy opened up to my mom about the situation with her own family and living on her own since she was a teenager. I think that hit my mom very hard because she's always been surrounded by a big loving family, and I think she was horrified by her own behavior towards Sammy, who wanted to be a part of the family. Overall, I think things are better between my parents and Sammy. My younger sister reached out to Sammy after Thanksgiving. I don't think any of my siblings expected me to ditch family dinner and I heard they were pretty upset I went on vacation instead. My sister apologized over the phone. I don't know if it was enough, but it was a good step. Sammy says she's feeling pretty neutral about my youngest sister. She said she feels like my sister is more sorry she was caught, but Sammy appreciated the apology. My brother had to endure a very uncomfortable few weeks at work, while Sammy was traveling. I think by Thanksgiving, he was confident that Sammy wasn't going to screw with his job. When Sammy got back to work after our vacation, he went to her office to apologize. Again, I think he apologized just to appease us, but he did it in person and didn't try to cop out. Like my sister, Sammy feels neutral about him. My other sister, my brother's twin, is the only holdout. She hasn't given Sammy an apology and seems pissed that she no longer has a built-in free babysitter. She's doubled down and said she has nothing to apologize for and Sammy is the one causing troubles. This has caused a bit of a rift in my family. My parents would like Sammy and I to come to Christmas dinner, but I'm not interested in being around my sister right now and I'm not going to subject Sammy to that. My parents have even suggested that my sister should stay home to make us more comfortable in coming. While I appreciate the sentiment, I would feel guilty about my sister being alone on Christmas. Her kids will be with their dad, Sammy and I have plenty of offers from friends. My sister would probably not be able to find a place to go on short notice. Sammy has told my parents she would rather not create a bigger rift and will come over at another time. Sammy told me, privately, that while she has forgiven my family, she's not all that comfortable hanging out with my family just yet. I'm perfectly okay with this. I feel like taking some time from my family will be a good thing. Sammy and I are still deciding where to go on Christmas, probably to my best friend's house. The best part of the update, my best friend's wife went ring shopping with me. She let me go to all the chain stores and balked at the prices for the same ring in every store. She eventually took me to a local jeweler and we discussed a custom ring. The jeweler completely understood what I wanted and I decided she would be great at designing a ring. She's pretty backed up with orders, and said she'd be able to get to it in January. A few nights ago, she texted me a picture of a stone she had found, to see if it fit what I had in mind. Sammy saw the text and it led to an impromptu proposal. She said yes. So, now I have a fiancé. We haven't really told anyone yet. I'll tell my family at some point, but for now, I'm enjoying sharing this time with her. So, things are okay. Better than I hoped since my last post. I'm very sad about my sister because I miss her and her kids, and I miss my family, but I feel good about my decisions. I feel like things will get better with my family, except my sister, in time. Sammy liked the idea of a destination wedding next summer, but we haven't even started any planning yet. Sammy told me after everything that's happened with my family, she feels confident that I have her back and that she finally has me as her true family. Update, Ida for not sharing my stepdad's inheritance with my brother. I talked to a lawyer. I told her my plan to continue living overseas and that I planned on going low contact with my mom and brother. She said I should set aside money for my mom and brother in the form of a trust fund. They will be paid X amount per month but can't touch anything else. I don't trust them both with a huge amount of money, so this way they will always have a steady income in their lives. I know this is against Lee's wishes, but I just need to take care of them this last time. I already have a will set up that everything will go to charities. I make decent money at my job, so I set up a will a while back. My family knew this when everyone visited me that one time. Sam still has a year of school before university, so he should still be living with my mom in the meantime. My mom has a room in a high-rise that Lee gave to her a while back, so they should be fine with a place to live. I plan to support Sam's university expenses. He's not academically inclined, but in our culture he will definitely be pushed to go to university. I'm still working with my lawyer to see how that can be without having to get too heavily involved. As to why Lee never found out about Sam, my mom is mixed while both of her children's fathers and Lee are the same ethnicity. Sam and I look like her, so it's hard to tell. Don't know why Lee decided to investigate after all this time. He was to blame for Sam being spoiled, too, with how much he had been letting Sam spend over the years. My mom is 10 years younger than Lee. Maybe that's why she had the affair. She has a university degree, so she can find a job if she wants. Her jewelry should be worth near 6 figures though, so there's always that. Lee's relatives took carrying out his intentions seriously. Ever since Sam became more problematic in his teens, the relatives tolerated him for their blood connections. Now that he is not, my mom and Sam are instantly in their bad book, I guess. Once this mess is more settled, I'm thinking of asking my workplace for a relocation. A change of scenery should be nice. I like my job, so I think I will continue working, but maybe my vacations can get a little more extravagant from now.
My mother always brings up the time I was bullied as a very funny story, so I snapped back and made her lose face. When I was 10 years old, I had a bad falling out with my best friend, which led to her bullying me constantly. I dreaded going to school every day and would avoid parts of our neighborhood where I knew she and her family frequented. One day, the bullying at school finally got so bad that a teacher noticed and decided she needed to call home to both of our parents. This day just so happened to be my mom's birthday. At the time, my mom was genuinely angry that she got this call on her birthday and that it put a damper on the rest of her day. She had to meet, maybe an hour tops, with my bully's mom, the principal, and a few of our teachers. She could still make the party my dad was throwing for her, but was in a bad mood due to the situation I created in her mind. As a kid, I was devastated that I was dealing with this at school. Then I came home, and my mom was against me, too. I fully believed the idea that it was my fault her birthday was ruined and that I did something wrong. In the, almost, 20 years since then, she's come to find it funny instead of a frustrating story. She brings it up constantly as a funny story, especially at birthday dinners or whenever we drive by a grocery store that I refused to enter for a while as a kid because my bully's mom worked there. For her, it's an absolute riot. But for me, it just brings back memories of being poorly bullied by my former best friend and then making my mom mad at me for being bullied. I've never laughed at this super funny story. It's gotten to the point where even other family members are uncomfortable chuckling instead of laughing with her. Her birthday is at the end of next month, and she started a group chat with some family and friends about meeting at a restaurant to have a big dinner. She, very predictably, made a joke, saying, "Hopefully, I won't get a call from head of the law firm I work at, saying someone is being mean to you at work before the party." I got super annoyed and texted, "Can you please let it go and stop bringing this up constantly? I don't know why you think this is a funny memory for anyone besides yourself, and honestly, I can't imagine why it's a funny memory for you either." The group chat fell dead silent. I later got a call saying I embarrassed her in front of a large group of people, and I could have at least had the decency to talk to her in private. God forbid she tries to make some light of a bad situation. She feels like she can't show her face to her friends now. I'm at a point where I don't necessarily regret finally saying something, but maybe I regret going about it the way I did, especially if she now feels embarrassed in front of her friends. So am I in his hole for calling her out?
My girlfriend asked me to stop losing weight because it triggers her. I can't believe the woman I love is making me choose between her and my health, but I guess that's where I stand. This feels like an impossible choice, and I know both outcomes will cause a drastic change in my life. My girlfriend and I met back in college. It sounds dorky, but we met at our college's robotics club. We had both joined because it sounded cool, but we were the worst students in the club, and we bonded over being SHT at engineering. We left the club as a couple, and now we're both 24 and we've been dating for 3 years. My girlfriend got a lucrative job straight out of college, but she works remotely while I go into the office every day. For context, when my girlfriend and I met, we were both severely overweight. It sort of bonded us at first. We were the only people in each other's lives who accepted each other's bodies, and we loved each other no matter what we looked like. We never really lost weight, and we have always stayed on the heavier side, until recently. I had a health scare a couple of months ago where I found out my cholesterol was dangerously high for my age. My doctor had a long talk with me about changing my eating habits so my issues didn't worsen, and he scared me enough to want to make a change. I came home the night after getting the news and broke down crying to my girlfriend about how scared I was, and how ashamed I was that I had neglected my body to this point. She comforted me and said she would help me however she could to help me feel better. I did a bunch of research and started seeing a nutritionist. I turned my entire life around in a month. I started working out every day and meal prepping. Before I knew it, I had lost 15 pounds and the weight just kept melting off. But my favorite part of it all was how much these changes improved my mental health. Yeah, my body was looking better, but I had never felt prouder of myself and more comfortable in my skin. My wife had been supportive at first, and I encouraged her to join me on my health journey. I never pressured her to eat the same food as me, but I would invite her here and there to come on jogs with me. I never made her feel bad when she would turn me down, but I felt a distance growing in our relationship as our lifestyles just kept getting more different. My girlfriend is pretty inactive. She doesn't work out and only leaves the house when she needs to. So when I stopped eating the same foods as her and started focusing on exercise, it caused a change in her behavior towards me. I would try and check in with her about how she was feeling, but she never brought up any concerns even though she slowly started getting more distant from me and just generally acting more quiet. One day I came home, and my girlfriend had ordered us a big meal from our once favorite restaurant. She looked so excited and had set up a romantic dinner for us with candles and everything. I kissed her and told her I appreciated how much thought she put into all the dinner, but I didn't eat this type of food anymore, and it could really disrupt my system. My girlfriend's face sank, and all she said was fine before she tore away from me. I told her I was sorry again, but the next thing I knew she was crying and hurling all the fresh food into the trash. I tried to calm her down and begged her to just talk to me. I grabbed her wrist, and that's when she finally snapped and said fine, let's effing talk then. My girlfriend started yelling at me and accusing me of changing. She said that ever since I began to lose weight, she didn't feel like a priority in my life. She said she thought I would drop all this after my cholesterol dropped, and she was upset that all this healthy bullshit had totally taken over my whole personality. Finally, she accused me of shoving my weight loss in her face. She said that I knew losing weight was hard for her and that I was triggering her daily by losing so much weight while she continued to gain. My heart hurt for her. No one wants to see their partner so upset and know it was their fault. But at the same time I think she's acting sort of selfish. I thought she would be happy for me, not jealous. She has always been a supportive partner, and I'm heartbroken that she would treat me this way. I love my girlfriend so much, I want to marry her one day, but how do I choose between her and my own health? Wife lets our son walk all over the family. So my son who is 11 has autism. This has been a cause of so many arguments over the years. We establish a routine that he will stick to and limit his technology because if not he's very hard to manage. My wife goes along with this plan for a day or two and then when our son shows the first signs of fighting it she gives in and then gets onto me for refusing him. I'm at my wit's end because of it and no matter how often I bring it up it never changes. My wife blames me for his attitude even though I can clearly see the reason for it. Last night I said to our son that if he shouted at his brothers again I was taking his phone for the rest of the night. This was like an hour before bed. He did it again and I took the phone and he followed me. He was saying give it back now over and over and then my wife said it. I gave it back and then when he was out of earshot I said to her that she was dealing with the attitude from now on because I wasn't getting anywhere with him because it's always the same. He causes us to shout at him and then I get the blunt end of it as if it's my fault. She's always telling me to just leave him when he does something. Today he's been a nightmare and I've kept out of it. He's been screaming at his brothers, pulling toys out of their hands, ignoring my wife when he's been told to do something, losing his head over nothing and had his phone in his hand the entire time. She's either sat there ignoring what's going on around her or getting onto his brothers for retaliating while saying nothing to him. She also said he wasn't spending the summer on his phone and so far in the last 2 days he hasn't put it down. He's picking up on the fact that my wife gives into everything and letting him away with everything. He's also picking up on the fact that she talks to me the way she does when it comes to him and he's doing the same. Her mother and sister go on the same way and she's always telling them what goes on so now her sister hates me. I keep telling her that she needs to stick to a routine with him because it will hinder him when he's an adult. I also keep telling her to talk about all of this to her therapist instead of her family but she keeps doing both. I keep telling her that her family don't have the same attachment to me as she does and they are her family. They are also getting one side of the story so they are going to be biased towards me, which in turn is only going to fuel the fire with both my wife and son. Don't get me wrong, In every other aspect, myself and my wife are great, but when it comes to our son, we constantly argue. She's fine with how I am with the other kids. I don't want him growing up thinking it's okay to treat others how he does. I also want him to be able to manage his own life and not be so dependent on technology. What do I do when my wife is against me and only this but nothing else, or am I the one in the wrong expecting this? Has a nightmare ever saved you? Many years ago, I used to bartend. There was this guy that would come in who would give me the creeps. He had long red hair and really pale skin, and he'd come every day at lunch and just stare at me. I didn't have any reason to feel weird, as many guys that are drinking at a bar at noon will stare at the female bartender, but his stare was so intense I could just feel it. So then one day he comes in and says, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure, what?" And he pulled out this weird picture from a magazine of some lady in lingerie and asked if that would be a good gift for someone. I just shrugged and said, "I would just let a lady pick out her own lingerie and get her flowers and chocolates if you really like her." It gave me the creeps so bad. So anyway, one night my mom came in to visit me while I was bartending. She seemed upset and I asked her what was wrong. She said the night prior she had a nightmare about a guy that asked me to come to his apartment to cut his hair. I went and he asked if I could cut it in the bathroom. So he sat on the toilet, and as I started to cut his hair he started to stab me and I died on his bathroom floor. There were more gory details I won't write. I assured her I was fine but said, just to be safe, what did this man look like? She said he was a white guy with long red hair. A shiver ran down my spine. So as my mom and I were sitting there talking, guess who walks in? My mom looked up and said, "Oh my God, that is the guy. Please tell me you will never ever let yourself be alone with this guy." I promised. So as the night went on, my mom left, and when I went to get him his beer, he asked me out on a date and said, "Would you be able to come to my house for something? I need a favor." I literally felt like I was going to faint. I don't even remember what I answered, and I never asked him what the favor was. But somehow just politely said no. I had a really good friend that would always hang out when I was bartending who was protective over me. I told him what happened and he said he'd keep an eye on him and wouldn't leave the bar at all until we had closed and I was on my way home. So closing time came and the guy had left and I was so relieved. My friend, Bill, stayed to help me clean up the bar. He went to take the garbage out and saw the guy crouched down beside the dumpster like he was in wait. He continued to throw the garbage into the dumpster and acted like he didn't see the guy and came inside and told me, and he called 911 right away. The police came and found him. I am not sure what happened after that. I don't know if he got arrested, or they just talked to him, or why he was there or what he was planning on doing. I never heard anything further and never saw him again.
She divorced me because I left dishes by the sink. It seems so unreasonable when you put it that way. My wife left me because sometimes I leave dishes by the sink. It makes her seem ridiculous, and makes me seem like a victim of unfair expectations. We like to point fingers at other things to explain why something went wrong. This bad thing happened because of this, that, and the other thing. Not because of anything I did. Sometimes I leave used drinking glasses by the kitchen sink, just inches away from the dishwasher. It isn't a big deal to me now. It wasn't a big deal to me when I was married. But it was a big deal to her. Every time she'd walk into the kitchen and find a drinking glass by the sink, she moved incrementally closer to moving out and ending our marriage. I just didn't know it yet. But even if I had, I fear I wouldn't have worked as hard to change my behavior as I would have stubbornly tried to get her to see things my way. The idiom to cut off your nose to spite your face was created for such occasions. Men are not children, even though we behave like them. Feeling respected by others is important to men. Feeling respected by one's wife is essential to living a purposeful and meaningful life. Maybe I thought my wife should respect me simply because I exchanged vows with her. It wouldn't be the first time I acted entitled. One thing I know for sure is that I never connected putting a dish in the dishwasher with earning my wife's respect. I remember my wife often saying how exhausting it was for her to have to tell me what to do all the time. It's why the sexiest thing a man can say to his partner is "I got this," and then take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. I always reasoned, if you just tell me what you want me to do, I'll gladly do it. But she didn't want to be my mother. She wanted to be my partner, and she wanted me to apply all of my intelligence and learning capabilities to the logistics of managing our lives and household. She wanted me to figure out all of the things that needed to be done, and devise my own method of task management. I wish I could remember what seemed so unreasonable to me about that at the time. Men can do things. Men invented heavy machines that can fly in the air reliably and safely. Men proved the heliocentric model of the solar system, establishing that the Earth orbits the Sun. Men design and build skyscrapers, and take hearts and other human organs from dead people and replace the corresponding failing organs inside of living people, and then those people stay alive afterward. Which is insane. Men are totally good at stuff. Men are perfectly capable of doing a lot of these things our wives complain about. What we are not good at is being psychic, or accurately predicting how our wives might feel about any given thing, because male and female emotional responses tend to differ pretty dramatically. Hey Matt. Why would you leave a glass by the sink instead of putting it in the dishwasher? Several reasons. I may want to use it again. I don't care if a glass is sitting by the sink unless guests are coming over. I will never care about a glass sitting by the sink. Ever. It's impossible. It's like asking me to make myself interested in crocheting, or to enjoy yard work. I don't want to crochet things. And it's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which doing a bunch of work in my yard sounds more appealing than any of several thousand less sucky things which could be done. There is only one reason I will ever stop leaving that glass by the sink. A lesson I learned much too late, because I love and respect my partner, and it really matters to her. I understand that when I leave that glass there, it hurts her, literally causes her pain, because it feels to her like I just said, hey. I don't respect you or value your thoughts and opinions. Not taking 4 seconds to put my glass in the dishwasher is more important to me than you are. All of a sudden, it's not about something as benign and meaningless as a dirty dish. Now, it's a meaningful act of love and sacrifice, and really? 4 seconds? That doesn't seem like the kind of thing too big to do for the person who sacrifices daily for me. I don't have to understand why she cares so much about that stupid glass. I just have to understand and respect that she does. Then caring about her equals putting glass in the dishwasher. Caring about her equals keeping your laundry off the floor. Caring about her equals thoughtfully not tracking dirt or whatever on the floor she worked hard to clean. Caring about her equals taking care of kid-related things so she can just chill out for a little bit and not worry about anything. Caring about her equals hey babe. Is there anything I can do today or pick up on my way home that will make your day better? Caring about her equals a million little things that say I love you more than speaking the words ever can. The man capable of that behavioral change, even when he doesn't understand her or agree with her thought process, can have a great relationship. Men want to fight for their right to leave that glass there. It might look like this: eat poop, wife, we think. I sacrificed a lot for you, and you're going to get on me about one glass by the sink? That little bullshit glass that takes a few seconds to put in the dishwasher, which I'll gladly do when I know I'm done with it, is so important to you that you want to give me BS about it? You want to take an otherwise peaceful evening and have an argument with me, and tell me how I'm getting something wrong and failing you, over this glass? After all of the big things I do to make our life possible, things I never hear a thank you for, and don't ask for, you're going to elevate a glass by the sink into a marriage problem? I couldn't be that petty if I tried. And I need to dig my heels in on this one. If you want that glass in the dishwasher, put it in there yourself without telling me about it. Otherwise, I'll put it away when people are coming over, or when I'm done with it. This is a bullshit fight that feels unfair and I'm not just going to bend over for you. The man does not want to divorce his wife because she's nagging him about the glass thing which he thinks is totally irrational. He wants her to agree with him that when you put life in perspective, a glass being by the sink when no one is going to see it anyway, and the solution takes 4 seconds, is just not a big problem. She should recognize how petty and meaningless it is in the grand scheme of life, he thinks, and he keeps waiting for her to agree with him. She will never agree with him, because it's not about the glass for her. The glass situation could be any situation in which she feels unappreciated and disrespected by her husband. The wife doesn't want to divorce her husband because he leaves used drinking glasses by the sink. She wants to divorce him because she feels like he doesn't respect or appreciate her, which suggests he doesn't love her, and she can't count on him to be her lifelong partner. She can't trust him. She can't be safe with him. Thus, she must leave and find a new situation in which she can feel content and secure. In theory, the man wants to fight this fight, because he thinks he's right, and I agree with him. The dirty glass is not more important than marital peace. If his wife thought and felt like him, he'd be right to defend himself. Unfortunately, most guys don't know that she's not fighting about the glass. She's fighting for acknowledgement, respect, validation, and his love. If he knew that, if he fully understood this secret she has never explained to him in a way that doesn't make her sound crazy to him, causing him to dismiss it as an inconsequential passing moment of emo-ness, and that this drinking glass situation and all similar arguments will eventually end his marriage, I believe he would rethink which battles he chose to fight, and would be more apt to take action doing things he understands to make his wife feel loved and safe. I think a lot of times, wives don't agree with me. They don't think it's possible that their husbands don't know how their actions make her feel because she has told him, sometimes with tears in her eyes, over and over and over and over again how upset it makes her and how much it hurts. And this is important, telling a man something that doesn't make sense to him once, or a million times, doesn't make him know something. Right or wrong, he would never feel hurt if the same situation were reversed, so he doesn't think his wife should hurt. It's like, he doesn't think she has the right to, and then use it as a weapon against him, because it feels unfair. I never get upset with you about things you do that I don't like. Men reason, as if their wives are intentionally choosing to feel hurt and miserable. When you choose to love someone, it becomes your pleasure to do things that enhance their lives and bring you closer together, rather than a chore. It's not, son of a TCH, I have to do this bullshit thing for my wife again. It's, I'm grateful for another opportunity to demonstrate to my wife that she comes first and that I can be counted on to be there for her, and needn't look elsewhere for happiness and fulfillment. Once someone figures out how to help a man equate the glass situation, which does not, and will never, affect him emotionally, with deeply wounding his wife and making her feel sad, alone, unloved, abandoned, disrespected, afraid, etc. Once men really grasp that and accept it as true even though it just seems cruel, heartless.
Students, what is the saddest event you have seen in school? When I was in middle school there was a kid who was really quiet. He didn't have friends since he looked weird and just didn't fit in with anybody, so he just kept to himself. One day this group of scene kids were acting all friendly to him, like they were hanging out with him and everything. Then in the library, when it was this girl's birthday, he came up to her with this little brown lunch bag and said happy birthday, which just about shocked everyone because he never spoke to someone voluntarily. He always waited until someone would speak to him or ask him a question. She opened it and it was a silver necklace he made himself. It was really pretty. It had glass lined up almost in the swirl and the glass was cut to look like a little diamond and they were glued on a shell. She gave him a big hug and everyone saw that he turned red and looked a bit nauseous afterward. Months later they were found passing notes and hanging out more. Some kids thought they were dating, everyone else knew he had a crush on her. The two looked cute together, they would eat, read, and laugh together. He was even there for her when she had guy trouble. Some of the teachers called him her angel. Everything was going fine for them until he found out that she had been sharing their notes to their friends, some of which had really private things about him, like how his father abused him when he was younger and how he had testicular cancer a couple years prior. Naturally he just blew up and confronted her. I have to say the look on his face will always stick with me. In the middle of their fight she just went out and said that they were never friends and that the reason why she acted like a friend was because he was ugly and felt sorry for him. He calmed down but was visually heartbroken, so he just turned around and walked away. About a week later he just stopped showing up to classes, but people kept saying that they saw him eating his lunch outside at the end of the field. Well, it turns out that he ended up getting in school suspension for some reason. Whether it was that fight he had with that girl or if he got in a fight, nobody really knows. He got back to keeping to himself. You wouldn't see him with those groups of kids anymore. Less and less people started seeing him until it was like he disappeared altogether. Turns out he has been either skipping school or being locked up alone in school suspension. The school then found out that he has been getting bullied on the bus and at home. On the bus he would be thrown around from seat to seat in the back and then would be followed home while the same dirtbags would throw rocks and erasers at him. The teachers went with the same gag of there's no proof of bullying, so there was nothing anyone could do, but it was apparent that the bullying was getting worse. One morning he was seen eating lunch again, but he was wearing a jacket. It was late April and the temperature would peak at around 90 degrees. The teachers took him to the counselor and they ended up finding out he had been hurting himself for the past month. Instead of getting him help they just stuck him in school suspension again. Then came the rumors that he ate rats for lunch. It would all be over because he was found unalive in the in-school suspension room he was locked in. The school then held an assembly to announce his passing and for some reason everyone was sad. I personally was really shocked and I honestly felt at fault for not doing anything. The group that pretended to be his friends all acted like they loved him. Their sounds of crying were so fake. The girl he had a crush on acted like she lost the love of her life, how he was always there for her and ended up throwing a huge pity party for herself.
My ungrateful parents refused to buy me acne cream, so 10 years later I refused to pay for my mom's expensive surgery. My parents and I grew up very poor. I was sent to a public school, and most of the days getting a nice hot meal was a treat. My parents would never take me to eat out with them, because it was apparently too expensive for them to pay for me as well as their dinner. I would never get presents like all my other friends on Christmas or any other holidays. The only exception was that on my birthday we would be able to go out to either McDonald's or Chipotle. This led me to not have much of a social life, because whenever my friends wanted to go out they went to expensive activities, and back then I would envy their go-karting/arcade Instagram posts. Or whenever they would want to hang out, it could never be at my tiny place because I was embarrassed at them seeing the place I call home. I honestly started to resent my parents so much for this, but it was probably the sole cause of my later success in life. During my second year of high school I would frequently eat lunches in the bathroom stalls because no one would let me sit with them, and I always tried to sit in the farthest back chairs in class. And at home I had an abundance of time on my hands to spend doing my weird geeky hobbies like coding. I was pretty used to this lifestyle and got pretty content with it. Sure, occasionally I did want to yell at my dad for using the little money he made on alcohol, but over time I started caring less and less. That's until during the start of my third year in high school, where a new boy entered our school. He was an exchange student from France. He was tall and very handsome with blonde hair. He didn't speak much English, so he was assigned a person to help guide him around the school. That person was me, considering I was the only student in the school that took my French classes seriously, and at first it felt like it was paying off. I showed him around, but he immediately got attention from the other girls. However, he showed no interest in them, and would make witty comments in French to me about them. Over the next couple of weeks we became really close friends, and I was building up the courage to go and ask him out, but something crazy happened. Instead of me asking him out, he asked me out. I was so shocked because I had never received this kind of attention from anyone, not even my family. I was so excited that I immediately jumped at his offer to go on a date. He told me to dress nice because we were going somewhere fancy. We ended up going to McDonald's. Even though he was in a suit and I was in my nicest clothes, it was a hilarious experience and it felt like a dream. But this is where everything started to go downhill. I wish we weren't in such a cruel world where people found bullying fun, because the next couple of days a lot of the girls came and started asking me questions like, how did you end up with the hot boy, or doesn't he comment on your bad looks or acne? I just sat there frozen, unable to answer their multiple rude and condescending questions. Eventually, after a little while of them bullying me, I just sat there quietly until they left. That night, I went home and asked my parents for acne cream. It was the only thing I had asked from them in years, and yet my mom especially just flat out refused because my dad needed the money to buy alcohol. I couldn't believe it. That whole night, I was in my room crying, and my insecurity definitely reflected at school. My boyfriend started making comments about how I always looked sad now, and that I was always keeping my head down. But the things those girls said stuck with me, and maybe they were right. I didn't deserve my boyfriend. boyfriend. I became very isolated and I stopped talking to everyone altogether. Eventually, the boy that stole my heart with just one McDonald's date had moved on. This got me back onto my usual regime of just spending all my time coding and in my room. Eventually, I started reaching out to big tech companies because I wanted to get out of the terrible life I had here. I got an internship at one of the biggest tech companies, Google. I climbed the ranks to a point where I was essentially making a 7-digit salary. During this period of time, I kept very low contact with my parents until they heard about the work I'm doing and started asking me to help pitch in with their rent, and then from there the requests just kept on piling on. It got to a point where I had bought them a 3-story luxurious house and even bought them a Ferrari. I kept on supplying them because currently I was making a lot, but that's when my mother asked me for the unthinkable. She told me that she wanted a Botox and facelift surgery. I reminded them of how they refused to pay for my acne cream and didn't help me fix my face, so I certainly wasn't gonna help her fix her face, which was now filled with wrinkles. I told them how she cost one of the best relationships I had ever had, and now I would refuse to indulge in her beauty expenses. My parents are now calling me a selfish brat that never even cared about them, but they weren't expecting what I would do next. My ungrateful parents refused to buy me acne cream, so 10 years later I refused to pay for my mom's expensive surgery. After my mom wanted me to pay for her expensive face surgeries, I refused. I reminded her how they refused to pay for my acne cream and didn't help me fix my face, so I certainly wasn't gonna help her fix her face. My parents called me an ungrateful and selfish brat, which made me even more mad. How could they not understand the fact that I had done so much for them after they left me with such little? I decided to go no contact with them for a week, and I was hoping by that time everything would have cooled down. Unfortunately, I was incredibly wrong. In fact, my parents were even more mad at me now for ignoring them. My mother was now insisting that as reparation I had to pay for her surgery, because of all the suffering I put them through in the past couple of weeks. That was the last straw on the camel's back for me. I ripped my mother a new one, yelling at them for every single minute and macro thing that they have traumatized me with since my childhood, and the fact that I still did so much for them. At the end of my rant, I told them that I was done sugar mommying them and that I am not going to be paying for them to live in the house I bought, and I would never be giving them anything else in life, because they didn't deserve it. I told them that if Tay ever wanted to even see or speak to me again, then they would have to make an incredibly convincing, sincere and long apology. Edit. It's been a week since I had a breakdown on them and they still haven't spoken to me or apologized. That last thing that I heard from them was that no other child would ever put their parents on the streets.
Have you ever witnessed a bride or groom say, "I don't," during a wedding vow? What happened? Yes. The bride felt pressured into the marriage. I am a bridal assistant. Traditionally, the bride or her parents hire me. It's quite rare for the groom or his parents to hire me, but it happens infrequently. Leading up to the wedding, it was a destination wedding. There were several hints that the bride wasn't interested in choosing a dress, the flowers or any of the aspects in the planning process. I found this odd, and one day about a week prior to the wedding, I asked why. The bride felt inadequate. Everything was decided for her. She felt uncomfortable speaking her mind or making a decision. Her fear that the marriage would be a coup, follow the leader lifestyle was the reason for this. After she said, "I don't," I took her from the altar to the dressing room to give her a moment while stunned guests and family members sat open-mouthed. We needed time to decide if this was what she really wanted, without the audience. I should add that I'm also a premarital counselor, so I'm familiar with awkward situations. The bride told me, "If the rest of my life will be spent saying yes, I prefer to say no now. My family loves him. He's successful and a good catch. However, his parents make most of his decisions. He works for his father and I may never measure up to his mother." I decided to bring the groom and both sets of parents into the dressing room. This bride needed to voice her concerns and find a resolution or peace. She had waited 2 years to speak up and it was 2 years too long. The end result was they worked it out. They found a middle ground to move forward, and the marriage went on. I flew to California to baptize their baby and the family is doing well. They are happy and well adjusted. The mother-in-law now allows the bride to do things her way and the mother no longer pushes her daughter to do what she thinks is best. The mother viewed this wedding as the one she never had. The mother-in-law wanted everything perfect. The bride wanted happiness and the groom simply wanted to please his mother, her mother and finally, the bride. The bride or groom should come first. They are the life partner. They are the person who will stand beside you through thick and thin, and they deserve a voice in decisions and especially the planning process. The bride wanted a mariachi band at the reception. Both sets of parents were against this idea and found it to be tacky. I found a short notice mariachi band and the bride was absolutely thrilled. Quite frankly, if a marriage isn't going to work out, I prefer for someone to say, "I don't," and discuss with them their reasons before announcing a cancellation of the wedding to the guests or finding out if a resolution can be found. I'm glad this couple was able to reach middle ground and continue into a happy marriage.
Mother-in-law abandons my child, shows up after 25 years and expects to be accepted as a grandmother. When my son was 3 days old, his mother decided she didn't want a child anymore, so I've raised him as a single father since then. She claims she's not ready to have a child and refused to even feed him or hold him. I wanted to give her some time. I thought that maybe it's just postpartum depression. I was ready to be there for her, but she was serious. She packed her stuff and left the hospital. Her last words were that she wants to see neither me or our son ever again, and she kept that promise. I got the feeling that mother-in-law had something to do with it because during her pregnancy she was talking all the time about how young her daughter is and how inappropriate of a moment this is for her to have a child. I think mother-in-law somehow secretly persuaded her to take this step. So I was left alone with an infant in my hands. It definitely wasn't easy. I was just 21 years old, I had to leave college and work very hard to give my son everything he needed. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone. There were people who helped me to get through the hardest period, people who babysat him while I was working, who gave me advice on how to take care of a baby, and I'll be forever thankful to them. When he grew up a little, it became easier. I could send him to a kindergarten and work without asking people to take care of him while I'm not there. During all this time I hope to hear from his mother. I hope that she'll eventually come around and realize you can't just leave your child like a worthless piece of trash. But, even though I had left her my contacts and she could call me or write me a letter whenever, she didn't. I never heard from her. She never once used her rights to visit him. When he was little, he often asked me why his mother left him, why she didn't want him. And I didn't know what to answer because I always tried not to speak badly of his mother in front of him. Now my son is 25 years old, he's a hardworking, educated young man, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of myself that I was able to raise him to be a good person. We stopped talking about his mother a long time ago. It was his initiative. He was like, well, if she doesn't want to be with us, then it's her loss and there's nothing we can do about it. So recently mother-in-law appeared on our doorstep. Without a call, without any kind of notification, she was just there and she had come to visit her grandson. I couldn't believe my ears, and at first, I almost didn't recognize her. And she was behaving as if she was a caring grandmother who had come to see her grandchild like she does all the time. Not like she was gone for 25 years. When my son saw her, he didn't recognize her either. I have shown him pictures of his mother and his grandmother just in case they show up one day, but I never really thought that they would. She ran up to him and hugged him just like a loving grandmother would, asking how he's doing and how big and beautiful he has become, and he pushed her away and looked kind of confused. I told him that it's his grandmother who randomly showed up to visit him, and he was like, oh, and walked away from her. Mother-in-law didn't take this reaction very well. She looked at me and was like, what have you taught him if he doesn't even say hello to his grandmother? He's looking at me as if I'm a stranger. Haven't you told him about his mother and me or shown him our pictures? Well, technically you are a stranger, mother-in-law. He had never seen you in person, so why are you so surprised? You show up out of thin air after 25 years when he's all grown up and expect him to treat you with love. Isn't it kind of delusional? My son said, Dad did show me your picture, but I needed no picture, I needed you to be there for me. He was quite hateful with her, throwing question after question at her, and mother-in-law's responses were so incredibly narrow-minded, it looked like she wasn't expecting him to ask any questions. He asked her where his mother was and mother-in-law was like, oh, she's doing very well, she's living together with a great man and she has 2 nice kids. She has gotten over that misunderstanding about your birth. She was acting as if her daughter was the victim here. As if we were the ones who left her. He asked her why did his mother abandon him. Mother-in-law said, well, she was such a young girl, it would be crazy for her to have a child at that age. She had her whole life ahead of her and a baby would only be an obstacle. You must understand it, she didn't want to lose her freedom. Honestly, her daughter was older than me when our son was born, she was 24. I don't think it's too early to have a child, it's not like she was 14 or something. Actually, age has nothing to do with it. I could have given up my son too, I was very young as well. But I didn't because I loved him and I wanted to be his father. At this point I wanted to show mother-in-law the door. Obviously, she wasn't welcome in our house, but my son stopped me. He had one more question. He asked why mother-in-law didn't want to be his grandmother. His mother left him, fine, but why did mother-in-law leave him too? Mother-in-law said, well, I had no time to take care of you. I was a young woman too, I had my life too. And grandkids are only obligated to take care of grandparents when they're old, and that's why I'm here. Then my son told her to leave and never come back. He said he doesn't want to see her ever again and he won't help her with anything. And as she was leaving, she attacked me like that's what I thought. A man alone cannot raise a proper human being. Such a rude and impolite boy, he would have turned out better in an orphanage than with you. So according to mother-in-law, the conclusion is, don't have children while you're young, or if you do, feel free to leave them and then come back a few decades later and they'll love you even though they have never received any kind of care from you. But seriously, what the hell was she expecting? Security wants to show us the last 5 photos on our phone. I show them my butthole. My coworker, and absolute hero, maliciously complied at security on one of our subcontractor jobs. The customer was a manufacturer for high-end electronic components. Security was tight as a small 4 inches by 6 inches box could contain $250,000 worth of microchips. Our team was installing equipment in their facility for 1 week. A security checkpoint had to be passed every trip in or out of the building. Mr. Security Guard, Chad maybe, decided my coworker, Steve probably, was more suspicious than the other 4 techs. So every trip in or out, not only was Steve made to dump his entire contents of his backpack out on the table and go through it, Chad required Steve to show him the last 5 pictures taken on his phone to prove he wasn't stealing secrets. This is all fine, except Chad lets everyone else through without any sort of inspection. Steve is trying to stay positive, but obviously this is eating away at him. Steve tries to be overly positive and also a bit snarky with comments like "Thank you Paul Blart for keeping America safe," which busts up the rest of our crew. Then, Steve has the idea that will free him the rest of the week. Wednesday comes along, Steve is overly scrutinized on our way in as usual. As we head to security at lunch, Steve says he has to go to the bathroom. He comes back out a few minutes later, absolutely giddy. Chad Blart, mall cop, stops us on our way out and asks Steve to see his camera roll. Steve gladly hands the phone over. Chad is greeted by some very peculiarly angled shots of Steve's butthole. What the F? Chad throws the phone down on the table. Oh, sorry, I thought I had a hemorrhoid and wanted to see how bad it was. Is everything okay with my pictures? Is the facility safe? Chad never checked Steve's materials again. Good on you, Steve. My husband talks to his teddy bears more than me. We have been happily married for just over 7 months now. Bought our first home and we're talking about having kids. Everyone sees us as the perfect couple. This was until recently. Since lockdown started, my husband, we'll call him Phil, has been acting strange. This is only a recent thing, but he is taking a liking to stuffed animals, in a disturbing way. Phil had given me a few teddies from past Valentines which were stored away when we moved into our house. Last month I went into our bedroom and he had them laid out on the bed, 3 of them. Said he wanted to sleep with them. One of the animals is a small panda which he likes the most. He named him Kyle. I didn't think much of it then, I just thought it was a bit odd and he was probably joking. A month later and he's ordered countless teddy bears online. We must have about 20 at this stage. He brings some downstairs when we have dinner and pretends to feed them. He tells me not to be so rude to them when I don't respond to their questions. Last week, I seen him in the bedroom having a full-blown conversation with Kyle and others about the effects the virus will have on the country. One time, we went to go to bed and I shoved them off the bed and he screamed. Yes, screamed. In a complete serious tone he said you could have hurt them. I've asked him countless of times what's going on and where the F did this strange obsession come from, but he says there's nothing strange about it. He just likes them and to stop questioning him about it. The worst part is he has completely stopped talking to me since this strange behavior started. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a grown man having a sentimental teddy bear. But these have become like his kids in a way. I know it sounds bizarre. Honestly, I didn't even want to post this as it's so embarrassing, but I need advice. What the hell is going on? I feel like I've lost my partner and he has gone completely mad. He is an intelligent, well-respected man in his field of work and has always been mature beyond his age. I'm typing this in bed and my husband is sleeping next to me. Except instead of me, he's cuddling Kyle. Please help.
I am a woman who was falsely accused of SA. It has ruined my life, and the accuser is living a perfect life now. Every time I've read about false SA accusations on the internet, it's always been a story about a woman accusing a man. I want people to hear my story. When I was 18, I took a high school photography class with mostly freshmen. Since I was a transfer student, I had to make up credits most seniors had already finished. I had my locker in the freshman hallway and ate lunch with the younger students because that's where the school had space for me. Most of my friends were freshmen and sophomores, and I didn't think anything of it. My mental illnesses have left me a bit emotionally stunted, so I always felt immature for my age. At the time, my psychiatrist was trying to find medication that would cure my panic attacks. I was taking a lot of prescription sedatives that made my brain fuzzy. It was hard to focus or retain detailed memories. It felt like I was a little drunk all the time. One day when we didn't have school, a boy from my class invited me to hang out at his grandma's house. He had some chairs and a TV set up in the garage. I remember him being verbally flirtatious, and the next moment, I was on the floor with no bottoms on. I tried to get up but felt the weight of him holding me down as he inserted something I couldn't see, fingers maybe, into me. He was younger, but taller and heavier than me. I tried to shake it off like a bad dream, but the next day I was bleeding and in pain, not from a period, so I went to the school nurse and told her what happened. This was the biggest mistake of my life. She told the police. I gave my side of the story to a female officer and she went to interview the boy, who told her I wanted it. Imagine my surprise when I got a notice in the mail that I was being charged with felony criminal intimate conduct with an underage person. The boy was a few months under the age of consent. A year of legal battles followed. My therapist defended my innocence, mentioning her concern about my unusually low intimate drive. The boy's own parents spoke in my defense as well, telling the judge that he had brought other girls home when he wasn't supposed to, but it didn't matter. The prosecuting attorney told me that if I really believed I was innocent, I could take the case to trial, but if I lost, I could face 5 years in prison and time on the offender registry. If I pled guilty, I'd get a stay of adjudication, the charge would drop off my record after 5 years, and I could continue my life on unsupervised probation. I was 19 then and had just been accepted into college. I took the plea because I was terrified of being locked up. I just wanted to move far away from that place and be a normal teenager. I didn't fully grasp that the charge would never really go away. During the pandemic, my grandpa died and I inherited enough money to apply for an expungement. I defended myself and won my case in a virtual hearing, but it's still not completely gone. My FBI background check states there may be arrest data on file, though it doesn't say why. I'm now in a long-distance relationship and worried we will never be able to live in the same place. His country requires a clean police certificate, and if I apply to sponsor him to come to the United States, I have to declare my charge on the application and prove that I'm, without a reasonable doubt, no danger to my partner. I'm not a danger to anyone. This event left me so scarred that I've never been able to let someone touch me intimately without pain. My current boyfriend has been very patient and understanding, but many other relationships have ended because of my lack of desire. The guy who hurt me is married now. He gets to be with the person he loves. It's just not fair.
What was a brilliant idea but poorly executed? My ex and I had been married for 5 years, and our relationship was on the rocks. We desperately needed something to bring us closer together, so my ex came up with the idea of planning a romantic getaway. Instead of opting for a luxurious beach resort or a cozy cabin in the mountains, my ex had this brilliant idea to go camping. Against my better judgment, I agreed to this camping trip from hell. We packed up our gear, or what little gear we had, and set off to a supposedly picturesque campground deep in the woods. As we arrived, it became apparent that my ex hadn't done any research whatsoever. The place was a total dump. Think leaking tents, mosquito-infested outhouses, and sketchy-looking characters roaming around. As soon as we set up our sorry excuse for a tent, a thunderstorm rolled in. And boy, did it rain. Our tent started leaking within minutes, and everything in it got soaked. Our clothes, our sleeping bags, even our frickin' food. To make matters worse, my ex decided it would be a bright idea to attempt to start a fire. Now, I'm no survival expert, but I know the basics of fire building. Apparently, my ex didn't. They poured half a bottle of lighter fluid onto the wood, lit a match, and boom. The entire fire pit was engulfed in flames. Flames that ended up setting nearby branches on fire. We frantically tried to put out the fire, stomping on it like a couple of lunatics, but it only made things worse. Smoke filled the air, and we could hear sirens blaring in the distance. Yep, we had attracted the attention of the local fire department. We were escorted out of the campground by firefighters, soaked, covered in dirt, and humiliated. Let's just say our relationship didn't survive that fiasco, and for good reason. But here's the real kicker. As we were packing up our gear, the firefighters found something that made my blood run cold. It was a human skull, and it was half buried in the ground right next to our tent. We were in shock. Who did it belong to? How did it get there? And more importantly, what else was lurking in the woods? We had no answers, but one thing was for sure. This camping trip from hell had taken a sinister turn. I accidentally made my cat gay and he thinks I'm his lover. So my cat, Frankie, recently came down with a pretty severe stomach virus. The vet gave me some antibiotic drops to put in his food, but when I do that Frankie wouldn't touch it. So, the vet suggested using a small dropper tube to insert the medicine directly into his anus. The first time was absolute hell. My cat fought me the whole time, but once the tube was in and the medicine pushed out, he seemed to calm quite a bit. The next day he was acting strange. He has always been an independent cat, rarely coming around, never wanting to be held, but as I sat on the couch he started walking back and forth, meowing and rubbing my leg. He then went and jumped up on the table where we'd done the application the night before and meowed louder and louder until I decided I guess we will go ahead and do the medicine treatment. This time he didn't fight me though, and when I inserted the tube he closed his eyes, stretched his neck, and let out a noise that can only be described as a moan of pure ecstasy. Maybe the medicine made him feel better, I supposed. That night he slept on my bed curled up right next to me, which he had never done before. For the next week he'd do the same thing every day, meow on the table until he got his fix. But then the medicine ran out. Even though I had no medicine he'd still cry and beg for it. I thought maybe if I inserted it without medicine he would realize it doesn't make him feel better anymore and forget about it. Well, that was 2 weeks ago and he is only getting worse. He walks around me all day with his tail up presenting his rectum and trying to entice me. He is demanding insertions more and more often. Yesterday I caught him looking longingly at the turkey baster. When I sit he jumps in my lap purring and rubbing me affectionately. It was then in horror I realized my cat thinks I'm his gay lover, and that I've been intimately pleasing him for weeks now. Needless to say, the intimate tension between us is palpable. How do I let my cat know that I'm not gay, but still like him as a friend? My drunk girlfriend moaned coworker's name during intimacy with me. My girlfriend and I have been dating for a year now and get along well. We have a very healthy intimacy life where both of us enjoy it. A few months ago my girlfriend met a guy named Chris at her new job and they've become good friends. Since meeting him, she's taken up a hobby of criticizing me for minor things constantly. I've hung out with Chris and her a few times and I must say, he's a nice guy, very nerdy, and a bit awkward. Apparently, I intimidated Chris the first time I met him, which was not my intention. I do not get a vibe from Chris that he's into my girl, but she talks about him constantly. Yesterday at her birthday party my girlfriend got very drunk. I'm chatting with someone and out of nowhere she points at me and shouts how she's cheating on me. Everyone knew that she was dead drunk and no one minded her, including me. I gave her a funny look and didn't say anything while she laughed at me. Nobody laughed with her. Later, I noticed her having an animated conversation with Chris telling him that if he was a rod, she would polish him. She thinks it's really funny and keeps talking about how much she wants to polish Chris's rod, which seems intimate. We came home that evening with her wanting to have intimacy. So that night we had intimacy. We're both drunk. We're really getting into it when she moans, "Oh, Chris." A moment later she realized that she effed up. I'm drunk, horny, and non-confrontational so I ignore it. In the morning I bring up her calling out Chris's name during intimacy and she denies that it happened. She went so far as to call me jealous. She even texts him in front of me about the rod thing and Chris agrees that it was just a work joke, saying he didn't think she meant anything intimate from it. She scrolls through their texts to show me that they're just friends. It was pointless to try and prove that she moaned Chris's name, but I knew that I was being cheated on. The best thing I can do is follow my girlfriend to work and make sure that they are truly just friends. A friend of my boyfriend's body shamed me and I body shamed her back. Recently I've been jealous of my boyfriend's boobs. They are bigger than mine and for some reason it really pisses me off. Like bad. He's been working out a lot bringing me with him. He's happy with my body as is and when I weighed more, 280 when we dated the second time. This will kinda matter later. He's definitely no Greek god, but he is looking like the beginning stages of it. However, his man boobs are just popping. He always wears tight shirts at the gym and I see people looking. I'll be honest, I get jealous, but I never act on it. Sometimes I question why I got lucky to be with a guy like him. Not only for his personality, but he's also way out of my league. But I also have to take into consideration the first time we dated, how I would always be there for him and would cook for him all the time. Sing to him and just treat him with more than the bare minimum. I'll be honest, he was a really skinny loner kid. He didn't take care of himself much either. Plus I was also his first and I'm pretty sure his only GF so far. Here's when it became a problem. A few hours ago I went to the gym with him and one of our mutual friends, we will call him Danny, and his girlfriend, who we will call Tiff, who we only met once before. She hasn't been nice to me. She'd make snide remarks on my body. Usually my scars have healed, been clean for almost a year. A little backstory on Tiff. When we met her, she kept bringing up how me and him started dating again. It was a messed up situation and toxic on my part, but we got through it and are stronger together now. She brought it up not even an hour after meeting her. She kept making jokes about my body, but I didn't say anything about it. After they left, my boyfriend told me how she made him really uncomfortable. I've been insecure about my body since I grew up a fat kid. I'm still on the heavy side, but I've gained more confidence in myself and my body since dating my boyfriend. He tells me I'm the only woman he'd want and gives me constant reassurance and attention. I have no doubts about his loyalty whatsoever. Anyways, back to the problem at the gym. When Danny and Tiff arrived, I already could tell that it wasn't going to be a good day. Remember how I said my boyfriend wears really tight shirts to the gym? The whole time she was eyeballing him. He didn't notice, nor did Danny, cause they were both in their own little bro world. They were doing weights while I was doing the treadmill. Tiff decided to use the treadmill next to mine. I tried to be nice and start a conversation and avoid bringing up her eyeballing my boyfriend. It went okay. Not good or bad, but she brought up my boyfriend's body. She compared me to him. Mentioned how his chest was bigger than mine. He has daddy milkers like WTF. It made me feel bad about my boobs. How he was more fit than me. How he was more attractive and out of my league. I wanted to cry, but I didn't want to do it in front of her. She talked about how she'd be better with a guy like him than him being with, and in her words, someone built like a Big Mac. Honestly, kinda clever. I'll be honest, I stopped her low as well. She's very thin and kinda looks unhealthy. Flat in both ways. I'm ashamed I said this, but I told her that if we are what you eat, she'd be nothing. Told her that I could grate cheese on her ribcage. She just got up and left. I was so shaken up I just got up and went to one of the benches and just sat there feeling bad but also proud of what I said. Mostly bad, I'll be honest, but I tried to justify it in my head, but I just feel bad now. When Danny realized his GF wasn't in the gym, he said his goodbyes and left. My boyfriend came up to me and asked if I was ready to leave, and I just wanted out. The second we got in the car, I just started bawling. I told him everything that happened. What she said to me and what I said to her. When I told him what I said, he laughed at it and told me it was a good one. He told me I don't do anything wrong and just gave her a taste of her own medicine. He's going to talk to Danny about what happened tomorrow. He doesn't want to ever see Tiff again nor have me be around her. I'm nervous, in all honesty. I just feel bad about everything.
Women who have received unsolicited genital pictures, has it ever worked and you wanted to meet them? If it was from a guy, zero interest in meeting them, instant block. If it was from a girl, I'd be flattered. Double standards at its finest. Yeah, once, and it was from a cute trans gal who I'ma go on a date with tonight. I'm text to speechless. It usually cut the conversation short and it got them blocked or a stern talking to. What am I even supposed to do with this? Is this like a business card you just hand out? It's just a wrinkly PP on my phone screen that I absolutely did not ask for. What if I'm with family right now? What if I'm eating? Gosh, I hate people who send unsolicited pictures. If you're with family, they can always join in on the fun. What's the worst thing you've ever heard a teacher say at school? In 6th grade, there was an Indian girl in our class, and she was getting teased because of the way she smelled. She didn't smell bad, she just smelled like Indian food, and our teacher did this thing where she would pull a student into the hall and talk to them either about bullying or being bullied. Well, she took this girl into the hall and had one of her talks with her. The teacher then comes back into class and tells us all that she had a talk with the girl and explained to her that maybe her family could eat their more traditional foods on the weekends and more American foods during the week. I will never forget being 11 to 12 and thinking, is she crazy? I felt so bad for the girl. I told my mom about it when I got home that day, so my mom started packing me Syrian lunches. My mom was half Syrian, and called the teacher and shouted at her for it. The teacher then apologized to the class and the little girl.
What unspoken school rule cost you your reputation? When I was in high school, there was one unspoken rule that everyone seemed to follow religiously. Never, under any circumstances, do a number 2 in the school bathrooms. It might seem like a trivial rule, but trust me, there was a good reason for it. It all started during my sophomore year. Our school was old, and the bathrooms had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the stalls were cramped, and the whole place had a lingering smell that was a mix of cleaning chemicals and something else I'd rather not describe. But despite the less than ideal conditions, we all managed to get by. Until that fateful day, when everything changed. It was a typical Tuesday morning, and I was rushing to get to class. I'd had a rough night, thanks to my mom's questionable choice of takeout for dinner. I knew I was pushing my luck, but the need to use the bathroom was just too strong to ignore. I quickly scanned the hallway, making sure no one was around to witness my walk of shame, and slipped into the nearest bathroom. Once inside, I chose the least disgusting stall and did the unthinkable. I broke the unspoken rule. I tried to make it as quick as possible, knowing full well that time was not on my side. I could hear the bell ringing, signaling the start of class, but I was trapped, a prisoner of my own making. Suddenly, a group of senior students entered the bathroom. They were vaping, and I could hear the sounds of their e-cigarettes crackling. Some context, my landlord had a clause in our lease against broken down vehicles just sitting on the property, and the city did too. So I kept asking her when she was going to come get it. I got the runaround. She'd say would come get it, then either went silent or pushed the day back. Sarah even tried to convince me to lie and say it was mine. I flat told her no. I didn't want to wind up in trouble for having a broken down car that wasn't even in my name. During this time, I ended up befriending a neighbor who was determined to dust me off and get me back up on my feet. I'll call her Emily. Well, between Emily and my therapist, they finally got through to me that I didn't deserve any of this and that she needed to get her crap already. Now for my sweet revenge plan. Weeks of going back and forth with her to come get her stuff. It had been over 30 days since Sarah had taken off the lease. The idea of her popping up whenever she wanted made me extremely anxious, and I vented to Emily. Emily pointed out that I could have the car towed. I got an idea and we started plotting. I gathered up the last of her stuff from inside the house and put it inside the car and then called the non-emergency number to report an abandoned car. They sent someone out and got my info and some info off the car, then put a sticker on it. They said that the owner had 72 hours to remove it or I could remove it. I warned Sarah one last time that she needed to come get her car. Silence. 4 days go by and I still hadn't gotten anything from her to make plans to come get this stupid broken down car. Enough was enough. I called a tow company and had them come pick it up. The best part was it was at her expense. She would have had to pay the towing company a total of $5,000 when she finally decided to do something about the car. Emily filmed and took pictures while the tow guy loaded it up and sent it to Sarah, giggling like a maniac the whole time. Once the car was gone, I felt a sense of relief I had never felt before. My phone was blowing up within the hour from Sarah, who suddenly had plans to remove the car that she had neglected to fill me in on. Now bombarding me with angry texts stating I was trying to ruin her life. I told her that I wasn't, that I had warned her repeatedly and she had ignored me and all I wanted was to be left alone. If I was the bad guy, fine, I accepted that. I then blocked her and locked down all of my social media. I felt like I could finally begin to heal and move on with my life. Not going to lie, it felt good to get some payback for the last 10 months she had made my life hell. I accidentally dated my abusive father. So I've never met my dad. He ran off when my mom found out she was pregnant with me. There are no pictures of him anywhere and my mom hates talking about him. All I know is that he was emotionally abusive to her and a real jerk. I have a thing for older men. Call it daddy issues or whatever you want, but I pretty much only date or sleep with men 40 and up. My family doesn't know this or that I'm gay for that matter. It wouldn't be an issue, they just never ask. We don't really share personal things like that. About 6 months ago I met David at a club. We hit it off great. He's in great shape for his age, supposedly 43, although that's a lie, he's actually 47 as I've found out, really attractive, charming, etc. He left for a 2-week work trip a few days after we met, but we kept messaging each other and I really liked him, which is rare for me. We went on a date after he came back and have pretty much been dating ever since. He has a lot of money and I'm kind of his sugar baby, but that's not the reason I was attracted to him, definitely A+ though. I didn't tell anyone we were dating except for 2 of my best friends. He also never met any of my friends or family and I never met his. This changed last night. We were at a restaurant when out of the corner of my eye I spotted my mom. I don't live at home and we only usually text if we need something, so I didn't know she'd be there and I still don't know why she was. She hates going out and thinks it's a waste of money. She had not seen us yet, but David noticed me looking at her. I'll forever remember the way his face changed when he saw her. His expression went from his casual, charming smile he always had to this blank, panicked look. I obviously noticed and got a really bad feeling, so I asked him what's wrong and he just got up and excused himself. I kept asking him where he was going and grabbed him so he couldn't just leave. At this point I was really confused and suspicious. But I would have never guessed what would happen next. I don't think anything could ever prepare me for it. At some point while he was getting up my mother must have spotted us because next thing I know she's next to our table, asking me what was going on. I couldn't really pinpoint her facial expression because it looked like she was horrified, but again, at this point I didn't know David was my father and she doesn't know I'm gay. David is visibly uncomfortable and looks like he wants to die, he was literally sweating. I assumed this was because he didn't want my mother to know I was dating someone of his age. I was about to try to explain what was going on to my mom when she said, "Why would you go behind my back like this?" I was so confused, because again, I didn't know he was my dad, so like what was she going on about? She probably assumed I had looked for and met up my father without talking to her about it despite her telling us how badly he treated her. To me, however, it seemed like she was acting crazy for no reason. I kind of took it personally and thought she was trying to tell me who to date and what to do, so I casually told her that I was just on a date with my boyfriend and I tried to grab David's hand but he just jumped up and ran away. He literally bolted like an Olympic runner. I cannot get the image out of my head of him jumping between waiters to get away. Everyone was staring at us by this point, it was so embarrassing and I was mortified. My mom looked like she was frozen in place. I was more confused than ever, I had no idea what was happening. I had assumed she had asked me that because she didn't want me to be gay, which made no sense, she is very open and liberal, or date older men, which made a bit more sense but was still none of her business. But her expression just made my skin crawl, it's like I could feel the horror she must have been experiencing. She just told me to get up and come with her. I was still confused but something in Her body language told me to just do as I was told. I quickly paid for our drinks and appetizers. Thank God the main course hadn't been served yet. BC damn was that crap expensive. My mom excused herself to her friends, and once we were in her car outside, we just sat there in silence for what felt like at least 10 minutes. I didn't really dare to say anything. I was still processing that my boyfriend just ran away from me and my mother. I had also tried to text him, but he wasn't responding. Shocker, I know. When my mom spoke, it sounded like she had been hit. She sounded so wounded. I think it might haunt me forever. She asked me who that man was, and I explained to her, and I went on about how much I loved him because, again, I was still thinking of David as my boyfriend and assumed my mom's reaction was because of his age or gender. I cannot believe that I went on about how much I romantically loved my dad right to my mother's face. It makes me want to puke. Long story short, she told me he was my father and that she instantly recognized him. That talk was the most traumatic experience of my life. We both started crying at some point and just wept for a while in the car. I was howling, it was primal. I'm not usually emotional or prone to crying, so it was really shocking to me just how much pain a person can feel. We drove home. I slept in my old bedroom. We haven't talked about it since, but my brother is also staying at our place still and he knows something's up. Tried talking to me about it and I just broke down again. How do I ever tell anyone about this? The worst part is I think despite all of this I still love David. Just writing that makes me want to throw up. I tried messaging David, but I just don't know what to say. The last message I sent him literally just says, "Please call me, I love you," sent right after he ran away. Like, how do I come back from this? How do I ever look my mom in the eye again? I haven't left my room yet and I'm in tears again. While writing this, I can't even remember the last time I cried before yesterday, and now I've been doing it nonstop. If anyone has any advice, as if, who else would ever accidentally do this besides stupid me, it would be highly appreciated. What started off as a small lie but then snowballed into this is my life now. My wife thinks we met on the internet. We didn't. We actually met on a bus, almost a full year before we met for the first time. I was utterly captivated by the way she looked, the way she dressed, and oh God, how lucky I felt when she sat down beside me. I deliberately missed my stop just to stay next to her for an extra 30 minutes, and then got off where she did and immediately stopped, pretending to make a phone call as she walked off. I waited until she was too far away to hear me, and seeing that she hadn't looked back at any point, I found the courage to follow her home. With her address at hand, I returned to my own home to try and find the name. I didn't have any luck trawling public records, so in desperation, I had MySpace bring up the profile of every female user in the area. I scrolled through page after page of profile pic thumbnails, and I recognized her instantly. What followed was 9 months of trying to contact her. I didn't rate my chances highly, so I decided to contact her first on some fake profiles to give myself a safe sandbox to get to know her without any risk of my mistakes damaging my chances with her when I felt I knew enough about her to contact her from a genuine profile. It was tough at first. The first 2 accounts didn't even get responses out of her, so I started looking at the profiles of her existing friends and mimicked those, copying their interests and music tastes. I started chatting with her, first from one identity, then from another. At one point I was talking to her under 3 different names at once, each with a different personality, as I tried to figure out who her perfect guy was. Eventually, when I was ready, I friended one of my fake profiles with my real one and then had the fake me invite the real me into a group chat with her. We connected instantly, it was magical. I could always say exactly what she wanted to hear, my sense of humor was perfect, my politics and worldview mirrored her own, and we loved the same music. We had so much in common. It took me just 1 more month to finally meet her in person for the first time. I was absolutely paranoid she'd recognize me as the guy on the bus that one time, but she didn't. 2 years later, I married her, despite our entire relationship being founded on my lies. Whenever I think about it, I feel like a scumbag, a creep, a stalker, or some kind of criminal. But then I look at her and she's here, happy with me still. It's me who suffers with the truth, not her. My girlfriend is scared of me after I got into a bar fight. Update. Up until yesterday, it had been 14 days since I last saw Sarah. My brother had gone back home 4 days earlier because I didn't want to keep him away from his family for too long, and I could manage things on my own to some extent. So, around 2 p.m., while I was fixing lunch, I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened the door, there was Sarah. She looked really sad, with teary eyes, tired looking, and her hair all messy. Throughout our time together, I've seen her happy and down, but this was like the worst I'd ever seen her. I invited her in, and she sat on the couch. We both just sat there, not saying anything, kind of shocked. I was feeling all kinds of things. I wanted to hug her, I wanted to talk loudly, I didn't even know what to do. So, I just stayed quiet and waited for her to speak. After like 5 or 10 minutes of silence, she started crying and saying she was sorry, and then she started crying a lot. I was having a tough time holding myself together by that point. I held her hand and tried to calm her down so I could figure out what was going on. Eventually, she started to calm down a bit and began talking. And that's when things got tough. Something I didn't mention before because it didn't fit is that Sarah's mom got divorced and then remarried. From what she's told me, her real dad cheated on her mom when she was a kid, which is why they broke up. That's also why she doesn't have any connection with him. It seemed strange when I first heard it, but I didn't ask too many questions. But there's more to the story. Sarah's real dad didn't just cheat on her mom. He was addicted to drugs and treated her mom really badly, even hitting her often. Without getting into the ugly details, there was a time when Sarah's brother tried to protect their mom and got hurt too. So, when she saw me step in and get hurt at the bar, it brought back some bad memories for her, like a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, and she couldn't handle it. That's why she started acting distant and eventually left. Everything just got too overwhelming for her. During those 2 weeks apart, she hardly ate or slept, and she even had some really dark thoughts that I don't want to talk about. She thinks she's a terrible girlfriend for leaving me alone when I needed help, and she doesn't think we'll be together anymore because of it, but I told her that's not true. So, we've got a long road ahead of us. Right now, my biggest concern is getting her to see a therapist. I suggested we could do it together if she's scared to go alone. So yeah, that's where things are. Some of you were right, there was more to the story than I knew about, but how could I have guessed? My wife was in a coma, so I read her diary for comfort. I deeply regret it, and now I can't look at her the same. My wife was in a bad accident a few months ago that resulted in her being in an 8-day coma. Obviously when she went into the coma, no one knew at the time how long it was going to last. I was envisioning months, if not years, before she would ever wake up. If she ever did. It truly felt like I had lost her already. I was destroyed with grief and the weight of all the uncertainty. Every day that passed with no good news further plunged me into despair. We have been married for 10 years. We have traveled the world together. We are truly each other's best friend. I was seriously considering ending my life if they told me she was brain dead or just wouldn't come back from it. One night, I was in our bedroom and really going through it. It was probably the 5th or 6th day. I was emotionally and physically exhausted and drained from it all. Another day of no good news. I was laying on her side of the bed because it still smelled like her and it was comforting to me. She used to put on lotion at night before we got into bed, so I opened her nightstand drawer to get the bottle and saw her diary there. I have never gone through her things or her diary before, but that night I just wanted some piece of her. I don't know why I didn't just reread our old texts or something. I wasn't really thinking too logically. It's not an excuse, but it is what it is. I began to read her diary. She didn't write every day, so sometimes entries could be days or months apart. This diary was started about 3 years ago. Very quickly I realized that almost all of the entries were angry ones. Angry about female friends or social media followers. Long paragraphs about how they were home wreckers and ugly, or talentless, or some other negative trait. She would become furious if a woman followed me on social media or if we ran into a friend in real life. She wrote pages about these women and how she wanted them to die or have their lives destroyed. She was angry that I basked in all the attention and didn't remove female followers online. She was angry if a woman followed me and didn't also immediately follow her account because we are a package deal, not that these whores know any decency to respect that. She wrote long rants about how women know the nuances of social media interactions, and this somehow proved for certain that they wanted me, and were actively trying to disrespect our relationship by only following me and not her. I need to stress that none of the women she was angry about have ever messaged me inappropriately or acted in any way besides a friendly manner towards me. These were high school or hometown friends mostly. A big common element many of them had was knowing or being friends with exes of mine. She raged on about how I should not be allowing them to glimpse into our lives, and she suspected they were reporting back to my exes. To be honest with you, the entries were very unhinged and angry. Then I read some entries about how she had messaged some of them from secret accounts. I am summarizing here, but basically over the course of 12 years she has messaged and harassed several women, and subtly accused them of trying to sleep with me or disrespect our relationship. She pretended to be an anonymous person from our hometown, and would tell them things like, I heard XYZ talking about you and they told my wife's name, and my name, that you were obsessed with me, and just weird manipulative crap that would result in the person deleting me, without ever telling me why. Like we're talking years of this. Any new person who added me and not her was immediately a problem, and she made sure they knew it somehow in a way that would never blow back on her, but still got them away from me. So much made sense. Friends who had ghosted me over the years. People who blocked me. People who didn't say hi in public anymore. It's not like hundreds of people, but definitely 10 to 15 who I just never understood what happened. I would mention these things to her, and she would seem comforting and try to reassure me and then ask innocently if maybe they had a thing for me. Always non-threateningly. Always saying something like, yeah, I've had some guy friends who did that. It turned out they were jealous of our relationship. I had to cut them off. It's just not appropriate to have them around knowing their intentions were not purely platonic. I never suspected anything. I just accepted everything she told me as plausible and even thought to myself how graceful she was in light of it. I'm not even covering half the stuff in the diary. Just blatant manipulations of other people in their lives, people she got fired by digging up dirt, literally nothing crazy, maybe a Facebook comment someone made about doing substances, and sending it to their jobs. There were some normal entries. Basically things like trips we took and how much she loves me. Absolute night and day. She woke up from the coma days later, but had some mobility issues that are now mostly hammered out. I couldn't do anything. For months I've had to be the supportive loving husband she knew before the accident. I've supported her through her entire recovery. I have had to act like I don't know any of this. All the while living with dread whenever someone adds me. I immediately remove them as a follower. I don't know where to go from here. If I'll ever actually confront her. I would like to think I'd have the stones to do it, but honestly, I doubt it. Thanks for listening. My father's new wife and 3 kids moved in. They've taken over my room, my things, my space, and my budget and treated me horribly. I feel frustrated and very unhappy. My dad married my stepmother 3 months ago, and I feel like it made my life significantly harder and less pleasant. They moved in with us, and for the indefinite future, this situation will not change. We have a 3-bedroom house, and before they moved in, my dad and I had our rooms, both with bathrooms, and there was a smaller room, which was a study for my dad. After they moved in, Jenny 16 got my room, and I had to share the smaller room with Tom 11 and Mike 10. All my books, my telescope, and stuff are packed and in the basement now since there's no space. This made me angry, but my dad told me I had to be a team player, which he and his wife agreed on. Jenny treats me like poop. She sometimes acts like I'm not there at all and is super aggressive and hostile towards me. The other I asked Tom to stop going through my things, and she became so angry that I have no right to order her brother around. She told me to get it in my thick skull that I'm not their big brother to tell them what to do, even though all I asked was for them to stop going through my things. She said it's best if I don't talk to them since they will get less influence from a weirdo like me. I don't get that if she's so concerned that I might leave a bad influence on Tom and Mike, why doesn't she take them into her room? Tom and Mike don't respect any boundaries. They're always through my stuff. I have a watch which was a gift from my mother. She died of cancer, and they took it from my drawer and lost it. I found it weeks later in the basement with its front glass broken. Before they moved in, I had a $100 allowance every month. Now Jenny gets $75, I get $35, and Tom and Mike each get $30. I had an Xbox, but these kids broke it down. I used to spend a lot of time with my dad. He used to see me play basketball almost every week. He hasn't done it even once in the past 3 months since he's always working overtime. We eat out once a week, and none of them in these 3 months have been to any of my favorite places, but Jenny, Tom, and Mike have each chosen their favorites more than once. I complained to my father last week, and he told me that family is all about sacrifices, and I have to make mine. Haven't I made enough sacrifices already? I feel like I'm the only one making sacrifices. I looked forward to them moving in here, but I now feel like an outsider at home. It's not my home anymore. Life has become very difficult for me. I spend as much time outside as possible because being inside is frustrating, but this is also causing problems. My dad keeps telling me that not being around means I'm not accepting them as part of the family, while in reality, it's the opposite. So I get grounded for not being around, and being around is horrible. I don't want to live here anymore, but I'm only 15 and can't move out. I have nobody else who can take me in. I can't stay here for 3 more years. I'll go crazy. I often fantasize about running away at night, but I know that's also as horrible, if not even more. I don't know what to do. Can anyone give me a suggestion? Update: I decided to ask my dad and stepmother for some time to talk to them, and I just showed them my post on Reddit. They took a good half an hour reading it. There were times when it looked like they were going to start crying. Eventually, they told me they needed more time, and we'll discuss it in a few days. 2 nights later, my dad asked me to come to their room and make it short, and they got it. They both hugged me, and my stepmother started crying at some point. They apologized for their negligence and told me they effed this up. They put all their attention and focus on helping my step-siblings adjust to the new living arrangement and everything, and they neglected how difficult it must have been for me. They promised me that things would change. They realized that the room arrangement was not reasonable. So they offered me the basement. We went to the store, bought a lot of supplies, and made it a family exercise for everyone to contribute to refurbishing the basement and making it like a bedroom. So I'll have my room now. It won't have a bathroom like before, but I can share it with the boys. That's not a problem. Now it's Jenny $60, me $50, and the boys $30 each. So $15 from Jenny comes to me now. I think it's much more fair. It's not as good as the $100 I used to have, but this arrangement is something I can easily understand and accept. Now to Jenny. Well, my stepmother told me that Jenny's problem was not me. Her mother married, and she didn't like that because she was hopeful she would return to her dad. Now she's trying to make this not work, and I'm in her crosshairs. She's been a little bee to my dad as well. She promised to handle Jenny and ensure she won't be a problem. Now to the boys. This is the most difficult one as they're 10 and 11. Dad and stepmom gave me a small lock so I could lock my bag for now, and when the basement is ready, which will be in a couple of weeks, I could lock its door, and only the parents would have the key. So, at least my stuff will be safe. About other things, they also made little changes to make things easier. They told me I could come to them for any problems, and my dad promised me some father-son time every couple of weeks. I was happy with everything. They addressed most of the issues, found solutions, and so far, done their best to do everything they promised. Jenny came to me a few nights later and asked if I would come with her for a walk in the neighborhood as she wanted to talk to me. So we went, and she apologized to me for everything and told me that she didn't and still doesn't like that her mom married my dad, and she was forwarding her anger and frustration towards me, the only person she could, which was not right. She said that I'm probably going through similar things as she does, and really, there's no reason for us to make each other's lives even more difficult than it already is. So I accepted her apology, and we shook hands on being on the same team from now on. And honestly, she's been very different ever since. She's helping me a lot in preparing the basement and makes Tom and Mike help. The other day, when I asked Tom to turn down the TV volume, and he refused, she told him to listen to your big brother. Yeah, good things. I hope she remains this way. Overall, things are a lot better. I trust my stepmother a lot more now. Jenny is much better than before, and we're becoming more and more like a family, and the place looks and feels like home again. Doctors, what is the scariest example of medical negligence you've seen? I once had a patient come in with the worst case of acne I had ever seen in my 10 years as a dermatologist. She had pustules, nodules and cysts covering every inch of her face. On top of that she had wrinkles and skin discoloration. One dermatologist refused to treat her because they thought her face was too disgusting to look at, and another dermatologist recommended a product meant for dry skin and another for oily skin. And using both at once damaged her skin barrier. When she went to protest because her skin burned and her acne grew in size, the dermatologist said she was throwing theatrics and had her kicked out. She said coming to me was her final attempt at clearing her skin, and I was determined to actually help her. For one, I had to determine her skin type. Since a lot of people don't know their skin type, I always tell my patients that they can do a couple things to find out. One way is to hook your pointer finger, and lightly run it across your lower cheek and down to your jawline. If you hear a noise and feel a bumpy texture where you don't have acne, then you have dry skin. Another way is to drag your finger down your nose, and if it's greasy, you have oily skin. Once you figure that out, you have to get the fundamentals down by knowing how to properly clean and protect your skin. For my patients, I tend to recommend meditation, using lukewarm water to wash their face in the shower, and applying sunscreen before I even think about any formulation. This is because acne is often caused by stress, so meditating every day will easily release all the negative energy from our body. Most girls take scorching hot showers, which leads to dry skin, so it's best to use lukewarm water. And sunscreen is meant to protect every single skin type, and will clear the skin from acne by protecting it from UV rays, and decreasing the chances of breakouts when you go outside. This is very common among young people, and it's a shame because just applying sunscreen could clear most people's skin. So I told her that in order to see a change in her appearance, she would have to do these things every day, including applying sunscreen not just on sunny days because UV rays still penetrate windows and clouds, so her skin is always at risk of being damaged and breaking out. She said she'll take my advice and asked me what sunscreen she needed. I told her it had to be one without harsh chemicals in it because brands like Neutrogena and L'Oreal have octinoxate and oxybenzone. Octinoxate boosts cell growth when exposed to estrogen, which risks the development of breast cancer. Oxybenzone triggers allergies and disrupts hormone functions, leading to reproductive problems. That's why I recommended her a growth factor sunscreen by Sunray, because it doesn't have any harmful chemicals and its gel-like texture feels great on the skin. 9 out of 10 times when I recommend the Sunray sunscreen to my patients, they all come back with healthier looking skin because their acne scars clear away and their skin looks prettier and glowy, as they are protecting their skin while also rejuvenating its feel. My patient almost freaked out when she saw the price though, but then I explained that people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and equipment to make their bodies look good. However, our skin is one of the only things you can never take off, so I told her she needed to invest in it. We really needed to get the fundamentals right, otherwise, she'll have to live with damaged skin for the rest of her life, and never have a chance at clear skin. To further ease her mind, I mentioned that she could use makeup to cover her acne, as long as she puts the Sunray sunscreen first because it doubles as a primer. So her makeup would look flawless and her pimples wouldn't draw so much attention, and she would still be preventing breakouts when she goes outside. After explaining it that way, she agreed to use the Sunray Growth Factor sunscreen daily, and I scheduled her for a 3-week checkup. When she returned, she said she tried doing all the things I recommended, but she only stuck to applying sunscreen every day because she couldn't give up her hot showers every day and she found meditating boring. Luckily, because she didn't go a day without wearing the sunscreen, her complexion looked smoother and healthy, and she liked how pretty that made her look. Every time she applied it, she had a rejuvenating feeling that gave her more confidence to tackle her day, and honestly it seemed like it calmed her stress, which we want to see anyways if we want a patient's skin to clear. She also got rid of all her other skincare products because the Sunray Growth Factor sunscreen was the only thing she actually needed to start clearing her skin. She talked about how applying sunscreen while indoors made a huge difference to her face because it always gave her a consistent natural look, and she could feel her skin barrier improving. With that, her brown spots and hyperpigmentation disappeared and it wasn't leaving any scarring at all. Her wrinkles also started to fade, so she finally looked her age. Now that her skin was improving, everyone around her noticed the difference. She told me that people were being nicer to her in public and she was getting free treats from guys at stores and getting called pretty, along with them asking for her number. She said people usually kept their distance from her and she wasn't used to all the attention, but she really liked it. This made her stress levels drop dramatically. Surprisingly, she also mentioned that her mom had started using the Sunray Growth Factor sunscreen and her skin was hydrated so well she was looking younger by the day. I told her that the difference between people who use Growth Factor sunscreen versus normal sunscreen is that they will look younger, like they're in their 20s, while others will look more like grandmas. Needless to say, she wasn't a lost cause like all the other doctors she visited said. Keep in mind, the only thing she was using on her skin was the Sunray Growth Factor sunscreen and her skin was already starting to clear up. I knew now that her fundamentals were getting set, so I could start treating her pimples and other acne problems. And I was glad she was finally starting to be happy with her appearance since the first time I saw her I almost threw up too.
My boyfriend couldn't go more than 20 minutes without smoking a cigarette even though I was repulsed by it, so I threw away his lighter and broke up with him. My boyfriend is in a really stressful field. He works usually 16 hours a day as a CEO to a computer science Silicon Valley company. Last year, to try and cope with this, he decided to try to use nicotine patches, and he eventually also started smoking. At first, he tried to hide it, but I think he realized that I knew, and stopped doing it discreetly. He started to always smoke because I guess it temporarily relieved stress, but overall I think he got less work done because of the breaks he took to smoke, which in turn caused him more stress, and as you guessed, because he was more stressed, he smoked more. It literally got to a point where he couldn't go more than 20 minutes without smoking a strong cigarette. What makes it worse is that he wouldn't ever allow me to vape, because it was much worse than smoking. However, when I confronted him about his hypocrisy of smoking even though he knew it's bad, he usually just makes comments about how he is so stressed, which is usually matched with him getting extremely mad and then having to go out to smoke. He wakes up and immediately smokes. He then proceeds to drink 3 Red Bulls and put his nicotine patches on. I started waking up earlier than him even though he almost never slept because the smell of smoke started to make me sick. He even has different brands for different days and moods. If we are at a restaurant, he will excuse himself every 15 or so minutes to go to the bathroom and smoke. And he will start to have nervous breakdowns if he doesn't have a pack on him at all times. Our house smells like smoke every single day and I am genuinely sick of it. Instead of trying to quit, he tried to hide his smoking habits, but considering he was going to the bathroom and leaving it smoky and smelling like diesel, it was easy to figure out he was still doing it. This led to another argument where I told him he promised he would stop, and he got defensive saying he needed it. I finally gave up giving out to him, and nowadays we are exactly where we were before the argument. He always has it in his hand, and he has developed a cough because of it, as well as daily heart and chest pains. He also has a noticeably deeper voice, but I'm not complaining about that last one. I have begged him to go to the doctor, but he refuses, saying it's just an abnormality that will pass. I finally reached my breaking point last night. We were having intimacy, and midway through it he stopped, and got up, then reached into the drawer and proceeded to take a huge puff of a tiny cigarette. He said in his now sexy deep voice, "I can't get hard anymore without relaxing." He then blew a big amount of smoke near me in the bed. Without missing a beat, I stood up and grabbed his only lighter and threw it out of our apartment window. Mind you, this was also during the lockdown, and so he started going into an absolute panic. After all of that, he contacted one of his employees and said he would give a $1,000 bonus if they brought over a lighter, within the next 30 minutes. Needless to say, I moved back with my parents and I'm not talking to him anymore.
What office rule made you say you gotta be kidding me? I worked at a manufacturing facility in the 90s. One day, when I came in for work, I found out that on the previous shift one of the guys had pulled his parts out in front of a female coworker while on the production floor. In front of God and everybody, just pulled it out to show it a female coworker. Of course, the man was escorted off premises by police not long after and was terminated immediately. The problem was the backlash from management. In an effort to contain the problem, the plant superintendent came up with the worst set of rules ever. If a male is accused of sexual harassment a first time and an investigation bears fruit, the male will be subject to termination. If the investigation bears no fruit, a record of the investigation will be kept on file in the male's HR record. If a male is accused of sexual harassment a second time and an investigation bears fruit, the male will be subject to termination. If the investigation bears no fruit, a record of the investigation will be kept on file in the male's HR record. If a male is accused of sexual harassment a third time, the male is subject to termination regardless of the outcome of any investigation. Read those carefully. There is nothing regarding false accusations, nothing regarding sexual harassment by females, and believe me, that does happen more than you think. And, if a male is accused 3 times, he still loses his job regardless of the outcome of any investigation. So, yes, if a woman decides she wants to get rid of a guy she doesn't like, just accuse him a few times and he's gone. Well, this backlash by management led to the outcome I told the superintendent would happen. She was a good friend of mine. The men stopped helping the women and avoided them at all costs. Remember, this is a manufacturing facility. Working there involved lots of heavy lifting. It involved transporting heavy 5-gallon buckets of paint and heavy tooling. The 5'0" 120-pound women just couldn't carry that stuff and the men refused to help. The plant manager refused to purchase the thousands of dollars of equipment needed for a smaller person to transport all that heavy stuff, equipment that was never needed before, and instead started writing up men for poor work performance, insubordination, and so on. Here and there a few men got fired, but the men stood their ground and refused to help the women, who by now were getting pissed off. Costs and downtime started to go up, and the wives who worked there with their husbands who once tolerated other women speaking to their husbands started getting catty. A few threats were conveyed here and there. What used to be a big happy family of people who worked together, picked on each other, flirted some here and there, and had the occasional awkward yet laughable moment were suddenly just not getting along because management got a hair up its ass over one serious incident and made all men out to be the enemy rather than the one who committed the deed. After about 5 or so months, the aforementioned rules were, very quietly, rolled back. It took another year for everything to get fully back to normal. Speak my language correctly. I used to work at a Brazilian supermarket in Florida. The customers were mostly Brazilians, resulting in almost everyone speaking Brazilian Portuguese. My parents are from there, but I was born in North America. Although I do know how to speak Portuguese, sometimes my American accent bleeds through, and occasionally I don't know a word or two. People usually understand. But not this one lady. Boy, did she have something to say. I was behind the customer service desk so that I couldn't leave, but the lady asked me where something was. It was around the corner, near a specific shelf. I couldn't remember what the word for shelf was, so I said, a fixture that holds things. Well, the lady was having none of it. A fixture that holds things? What the heck is that? Do you even speak Portuguese? I pointed at the shelf. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry I forgot the word for that, but what you're looking for is right around it. The shelf was right in front of both of us, but she didn't want to look. You don't speak Portuguese. Get me someone else to help. I'm a little confused. I mean, it's just one word I didn't know, but my manager happens to appear, and I figure she's not busy. So I called out to her in my most perfect Brazilian Portuguese. Maria, would you be able to help this woman? Apparently, I don't speak Portuguese, so I'm not able to communicate with her. She doesn't understand anything I'm saying because, even though it sounds like Portuguese, she said it's not, so, honestly, I'm not really sure what language I'm speaking. But, that doesn't really matter, I guess. She needs help finding something, which I said was over there, but I guess she needs to hear that in Portuguese, which, again, I apparently don't speak. It turned out that Maria was well aware of this customer, who had come before and complained about everything, so she wasn't surprised that she was acting like an idiot. She almost stopped as she had to stifle some laughter. During my monologue, the lady just stood there looking like someone had slapped her with an idiot stick. My girlfriend blindsided me, asking me to explore being poly with her, and apparently I can't just say no outright. My girlfriend and I have been dating 3 years, living together for 2, and up until now I thought we wanted the same trajectory from our relationship: commitment, cohabitation, and eventually marriage. My girlfriend has always been more of the U-Haul type, which I admire in a lot of ways. While I prefer to take things slow and definitely fall on the more traditional side of things, my brother jokingly calls me the straightest gay, and I can see where he is coming from. We have discussed marriage, with the idea of an engagement within the next 6 months or so. Well, she comes to me last week and says she has learned a lot about polyamory and feels that it is wonderful and is something that she feels compelled to explore, and would love to take that journey with me. My very first thought in that moment was, no. Absolute non-starter. And my feelings have not budged one bit. I love my girlfriend and in general I want to be adventurous and go outside my comfort zone for the sake of new experiences with her, but opening up the relationship is just an absolute no. I want to give my whole heart to one full-time partner, not settle for several part-time ones. I don't want a calendar to keep track of who she's screwing each week. I don't want her to fall in love with someone else, and I don't want to go through the painful motions of trying to fall in love with another person at the same time. It just won't happen for me. It's not who I am. She is begging me to read some books, be open-minded, at least think about considering it instead of shutting the whole thing down. I don't want to read any books. I already know that I do not want this. I told her that she needs to figure out on her own if she can be happy just the two of us, and take responsibility for initiating the breakup if she can't. That there is no being half poly, so she needs to make the choice. Honestly, we're both crushed at the thought, but she feels like I'm being unfair. I resent the idea of having to earn my right to say no, but I'm starting to feel unsure of how best to handle this. It's been 5 years since I found your body. I wish you could see how I'm doing now. It's been 5 years since I found you hanging lifeless in the garage. At that moment my world fell apart. All my dreams of the future we would have, to just be able to say good morning baby, all of it gone. I don't even remember screaming or how I managed to get you down or what I did to try to resuscitate you. All I could fixate on was that one single point in time. I was so angry at you because I felt that you selfishly chose to leave me and left me alone to try and pick up the pieces. You knew I would be the one to find you. Who else would be in our garage? You never even showed me any signs that you were contemplating leaving like this. You made me question everything about myself. I was so overcome with grief and guilt and had so many unanswered questions that I know would never be answered. But I still love you. I never stopped or fell out of love with you. I love you and you were suddenly just gone. I was numb and empty. I tried everything to fill that void in my life where you once were and nothing helped. I know you would have been disappointed in me and the choices I made trying to find some sense of myself. I started going through therapy and I learned how to mourn you and start letting my grief go. I started to become myself again. I met the most amazing and gentle person that I think you would approve of. He's not replacing you. He can't replace you. Just like no one can replace him. I didn't feel like I was ready, but I learned to love again and he was there every step of the way. The nights when I would wake up crying because I would have nightmares about finding you, he was there. It's selfish of me, but there were times where I wished you were as understanding as he. Then maybe you wouldn't have left. But it's not right for me to compare you two. But I still miss you. I'm sure I'll always miss you, but now my thoughts of you are of the fondness we shared, and remembering your life now brings me joy and a small pang of missing you and not an overwhelming crushing wave of sadness and pain. Thank you for the good times. I wish you could see where I am now. The struggle of gazing at women, inappropriate or natural? I want to talk about the female perspective on something. It initially came to my mind as I was chatting with a friend at a cafe. A group of girls our age that were sitting nearby were having a conversation that, while I couldn't hear it in full, had a pretty risque subject matter. We averaged their looks and decided they would probably be pretty open to meeting people. My friend made the playful but not inaccurate quip that either the guys there were pretty damn good looking or the girls had low standards. Our average judgment of these girls' looks was probably roughly an 8. Now, I looked over at these girls again. I felt a sudden, instinctive twinge of discomfort, as if I was being a creepy pervert, checking out girls not even a third my age. I glanced away almost immediately, of course, and pretended I was doing anything but staring at them. Meanwhile, all my female friend did was casually look at them, and then look at me, without any hint that such a gaze could be seen as inappropriate or weird. I suddenly imagined myself going up to them and saying hello, and felt just as quickly that any normal response wouldn't simply mean that they're at all comfortable with me, let alone interested. I've always avoided getting close to or hit on girls my age that appear attractive. I try my best to not check them out, or even look in their direction. I've caught myself doing it before, sometimes unreservedly staring and only snapping out of it when I notice someone glaring at me. I never feel any pleasure at doing it, I just feel ashamed, like I'm a pervert and I'm intruding on something that I have no business seeing, and that feeling grows exponentially as the attractiveness of the subject in question increases. I also have a strong sense that, perhaps, it's just not appropriate. I shouldn't feel this way. I can't do anything about my basic sexuality, but it makes me feel like a creep nonetheless. I remember once, when I was in high school, I was sitting in a barber shop that was on the same floor of my prom venue. I was watching some ballroom dance show from the 90s on a mounted TV and almost got in trouble with my parents for that. I didn't feel ashamed of it at the time, but I definitely understood that feeling of what if someone saw me? Later. I remember once I saw another guy in a room called the spa at a public university. I think he technically wasn't supposed to be there, because he left pretty quickly. Maybe he was looking for some sort of illicit activity, but something in me thought, well, I'm alone in here with a girl right now. That thought made me feel uneasy and I quickly left, and somehow I felt guilty for thinking that way, that it just wasn't appropriate. I remember going into Lululemon a while back, glancing at some attractive girls there, and feeling immediately that it just wasn't appropriate, despite my best intentions. I don't think many men realize they feel this way, because they don't realize they're even looking when they shouldn't. And that's obviously not the same thing as feeling excited by the idea, creeping on someone, or anything like that. The idea of doing those things is obviously disgusting, but just looking or glancing, how is that in any way wrong? Who wins aside from decent, God-fearing men who don't want to be seen as creepers? I want to go up to these girls, of course, for many reasons, not just so I can hook up, though that would be nice, but I think some of the bigger ones are as follow: to be honest with myself, to tell them I think they're fantastic and to share a laugh, to talk about anything and everything, to share a joke, to listen to them, to find out about the world through their eyes. And that just seems impossible. With my friend, we shrugged it off and finished our drinks. I glanced back one last time to see if they had left yet, but they were sitting looking at us. I felt that same discomfort again, and quickly just convinced myself that they were just waiting for us to leave. We did shortly afterwards, and as I walked away I just had this nagging feeling that there was something that I was missing out on, and that maybe I had scared away my one chance at happiness, but it was just so inappropriate that I couldn't even consider it. I've been involved in a neighbor war and I didn't even know it. So, my wife and myself have been living in our current apartment for a little under 2 years now. The way our building is set up, it's a 3-floor building, divided into 3 sections, with 6 apartments and only 1 staircase in each section. We're on the top floor. This is somewhat important for later. Back in November, we had new neighbors move into the apartment directly below us. A husband, we'll call him John, and wife, we'll call her Jane, who was expecting their first kid soon, and their 2 dogs, a German Shepherd and a Chow. My wife and I have 2 dogs ourselves, a Bloodhound mix and a Labrador mix, and these were the first neighbors in our section to have dogs too, so we were really excited. Maybe our dogs could have some friends. However, I found out last week that these neighbors were essentially trying to sabotage me and my wife being able to live here by essentially filing a whole bunch of false complaints against us. And the thing is, we've only had 5 interactions with these neighbors. I'll include rough dates these happened so you can understand how sporadic these interactions were. Interaction 1, I ran into Jane while she was walking her dogs as I was getting ready to go to the store about 2 weeks after they moved in. We exchanged hellos, I got to meet her dogs, and it was just the typical welcome to the apartment complex, good to finally meet you kind of stuff. Interaction 2, happened around New Year's Eve 2022. As I was coming down the stairs to take my dogs out, Jane was just coming back up with her dogs. While the interaction definitely wasn't great, it definitely could have gone worse. My dogs did pull the leashes out of my hand, but all they did was essentially shoulder check her dogs and bark as a form of posturing, and thankfully no one got bit. She did call the office and file a report, and we all, landlady, the neighbors, and myself and wifey, agreed that my dogs will have mesh muzzles on whenever they're outside to limit how much they can open their mouths. These muzzles do not restrict the dog's breathing in any way, shape, or form. Interaction 3, happened in late February. Wifey and I were coming home from a date night where we went out to eat and went to Barnes & Noble to pick up the next book in the Heaven Officials Blessing series that wifey and I are both reading. When we got back, both John and Jane looked like they had just gotten home from taking their dogs for a drive, and the dogs were getting out of the car. This was my wife's first time really meeting them, so she stayed in the parking lot to say hi while I went ahead upstairs to put our dinner leftovers in the fridge and the book on the shelf. A few minutes later, she comes up cradling one of her hands. Their Chow actually did bite her, and her hand was bleeding. Thankfully, it was a small bite and we were able to clean it with first aid equipment that we had at home, and we were able to cover it with a regular band-aid. After making sure she was okay, I called the office to file a report of my own. This lead into interaction 4 and 5, both happened on the same day. Number 4 happened the morning after the bite, where once again, wifey, myself, the neighbors, and the landlady, we'll call her Clara, all met in the leasing office to discuss the bite. While Jane did admit that she loosened her grip on the leash to let the dog approach, she actually had the audacity to try to ultimately blame wifey for getting bit. Thankfully, Clara shut that down real quick and told Jane that it didn't matter if wifey approached the dog or not, the fact remains that everyone was in the parking lot, a public area, and where the Chow bit wifey would easily have been the face of a little kid. Clara put the same requirements that the Chow needed to wear a muzzle when outside and also demanded proof of vaccination for the Chow be sent from animal control. That night. Interaction 5, Jane came up to our apartment and spoke to wifey on the landing. I had just gotten off work, but I could hear them through the door. Jane was essentially saying the same things that she had said down at the office, still trying to shift blame onto wifey. Wifey actually still tried to extend a hand of friendship, saying that while our dogs might not be friends, we could at least be acquaintances. From what I heard, Jane didn't seem to like that idea. After the bite and the conversation at the office, we stayed behind to talk to Clara after John and Jane left. Clara said that after interaction 2, Jane had called the office 4 times in a row before I even got back into my apartment, claiming that my dogs were vicious and needed to be removed. Apparently, John had personally gone down to the office claiming that the German Shepherd had an injured leg due to my dogs, but Clara later saw Jane walking both dogs, and both were fine. Now, Clara has met our dogs, and she loves them. Both dogs love going to say hi to her, and they give hugs and kisses, which she loves, and she told us that she doubted what John had been saying the moment he came to complain. She also said that on multiple occasions, the Chow had full-on snarled at her when she wasn't even close, and told us that Jane knows that at least the Chow is actually vicious. For the next few months, we all do our best to avoid one another. However, if I or wifey was out with our dogs and the neighbors came back from an errand or something like that, they would lurk in their car until after we went back into our apartment. Even if we weren't anywhere near their car, they would just sit. Now, I admit, if I'm listening to a song that's almost over, I'll stay in my car for an extra minute or to let the song finish. But sometimes, we'd be out with our dogs for 10, 15, 20 minutes and John or Jane would still be in their car. I also caught Jane following us on some occasions, but she was always really far away, so I couldn't tell if she was actually following us or if she was just nervous if we would turn around before she got to our stairs. Well, the neighbors were scheduled to move out at the very end of May 31st, and they have the U-Haul truck. I was not sorry when I took the dogs out and saw them loading it during my lunch break. I've worked from home since the pandemic. However, at the end of the day, I ask wifey to take the dogs out with me, and we see they have another U-Haul, and they're unloading it back into the apartment. Jane followed us again during this walk, only this time, she was not subtle about it at all. She was right behind us for half of the walk, doesn't say a word to either of us, and while she is texting, she's regularly looking up and making eye contact with us, almost like she wants us to know she's following us. This happened at around 6 p.m., so it was still fairly light out. Later that night, at around 9:40, when it's very clearly dark, I took the dogs out again, by myself this time. Jane comes out of her apartment and says that lately, wifey and I have been stomping on the floor and it comes through their ceiling and it's waking her up in the middle of the night. Wifey does have insomnia, so she is up late sometimes. Jane tried to gaslight me and say that she talked to me about it months ago, but the 5 interactions I mentioned earlier are the only ones we've ever had. She said that she had called Clara about it several times, and that if we continued stomping like that and waking her up, she was going to call the cops. I agreed only to get her to go away, but as I thought about it, why in the world did she not bring this up when she was following us earlier in broad daylight and instead try to corner me alone when it's dark out? I also went back through my phone records, and the only missed call I have from the office was in March and was a callback regarding a maintenance request I had put in. All other calls in my phone to the office were ones I had made. Wifey didn't have any missed calls from the office, either. The next morning, Clara calls me. The place that John and Jane were looking to move to ended up being a scam and they were hoping to cancel their early lease termination and move back in, since they had nowhere else to go. I tell Clara what happened with Jane the night before, and oh, boy, does Clara have tea. Clara's assistant property manager, we'll call her Mary, is a personal friend of Jane. Those calls that Jane said she made to Clara about wifey and I stomping were actually texts sent over Facebook Messenger directly to Mary. These do not count as noise complaints, since they weren't made through the office channels, either the office phone or email, and from what Mary confessed, John and Jane were planning to file a complaint against us for excessive noise while we were moving out, in the middle of the day. Clara thanked me for providing my side of the story, and informed me that, while she'd give them an extra week and a half to let them search for a legitimate place to move to, they would have to be out by a certain day and no more extensions. John and Jane did not take that well. We happened to take our dogs outside when they were already out with their dogs. Call to the office, their dogs attacked ours. We start doing dishes? Nope, we're throwing around cookware, it's so loud. Should we call the police to do a wellness check? One of us takes a shower and a bottle falls due to the water? Are they doing construction up there without approval? The funniest one was they tried to call Clara to file a noise complaint while Clara was in our apartment with us monitoring another maintenance request being filled. We had to get work done on our tub, so yes, it was a bit loud. Clara was an absolute gem during this whole time, shooting down each and every single one of their complaints for the bullshit that they are, sticking up for me and wifey when corporate asked what was up with the deleted complaints, and she kept me and wifey informed during this last stretch of John and Jane's neighbor war. As I'm writing this, I'm watching them pack their new U-Haul. I feel such relief knowing that after this week, they're going to be out of our hair completely. Neighbor wars are exhausting. I don't know how Karens can handle this. This next part is sung to the tune of that song from The Sound of Music, So Long. Farewell. Good riddance, stupid beaches.
Am I the a-hole for yelling and breaking stuff because I thought she was having an affair? My wife has always really wanted kids, but it seemed like it wasn't in the cards for us. She had 6 miscarriages and we're not completely sure why. We've done multiple tests, but have not been able to find a real answer. The treatments the doctors offered didn't seem to help. The doctor admitted that it was unlikely she would ever give birth after having that many miscarriages, and that the emotional toll and physical risks involved were too much to continue justifying it. My wife was incredibly upset during this process. She kept saying that she felt like a failure. I tried to offer adoption/surrogate instead, but she didn't seem thrilled by the idea and was very depressed, but sort of done with finding ways to help it. She kept saying her body was defective. While this was happening, I tried a different approach from before. Before I should listen to her and apologize, now I tried to tell her I didn't want kids, it didn't matter, kids were a hassle, etc. I even went on subs like a regretful parent and sent her posts. I don't mind having a kid, could go either way, but I was hoping this information would make her less upset. It ended up doing the opposite. She started pushing away from me, and avoiding me. I did my best to reach out and try to fix things, but she was super distant from me and I couldn't figure out why. I knew she was dealing with a lot. But soon she was lying about where she was going. She would say she was going to work meetings, we work at the same place, and I'd realize that wasn't true. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I started thinking she was having an affair. I tried to talk to her about it, but she would avoid speaking to me about it. I would keep reminding her that I was fine without kids, that I didn't need them, but it seemed to have the opposite effect. That's when I realized she was pregnant. I found out because she started showing, not straight from her, and I lost it. I called her horrible names/slurs, broke a lamp, and left the house with my stuff. I was convinced it wasn't mine because why else would she not tell me and be actively pushing me away? I'm living with my brothers now and discovered the entire story. I talked to her about it and she told me she was scared to tell me because I kept talking about not wanting kids suddenly, and she was worried about my reaction. She also hid it because she thought she'd have a miscarriage again, so why tell me and get my hopes up if I did want a kid? But months went by and the baby was fine. You know how I said she was lying about where she was going? She was going to doctor's appointments, and I got proof of that. But she said that my outburst freaked her out, and she just needs to process everything. I feel bad because she is 6 months pregnant now, the farthest she has ever gotten, and I want to be there for her. Am I the a-hole for how I reacted? Should she forgive me?
He scoffed at me, so I got him fired and sent back to his country. Picture this. I'm working my butt off at my job, just trying to make a decent living and dealing with the daily grind. Now, in any workplace, you're bound to come across some arrogant jerks who think they're all high and mighty. And let me tell you, this particular guy took the cake. Let's call him Jake, for the sake of this story. Jake was one of those know-it-all types with a superiority complex that could make your blood boil. Now, one day, I happened to make a mistake on a project. It happens, right? But instead of offering some constructive criticism or even just letting it slide, Jake decides to scoff at me. That condescending look he gave me, like I was a complete idiot, oh boy, it ignited a fire within me that I had never experienced before. I wasn't about to let him mock me and get away with it. Oh no. I'm the kind of person who fights fire with fire. So, I decided to dig a little deeper and ended up discovering some shady stuff that Jake was involved in. Turns out, he wasn't exactly following the company's ethical guidelines. This was the perfect opportunity for revenge. Using my cunning skills, I gathered all the evidence I needed and anonymously submitted it to management. No mercy, no second thoughts. And let me tell you, the fallout was absolutely explosive. Jake got fired on the spot, sent packing with his tail between his legs. Justice, right? Well, that's where things started to take an unexpected turn. You see, after Jake got canned, tensions escalated. People started pointing fingers and questioning who had sent in the incriminating evidence. I managed to fly under the radar, keeping my involvement a secret. But let me tell you, the atmosphere got tense. It wasn't just a regular workplace anymore, it was a battlefield of distrust and paranoia. Just when I thought the storm had passed, I received a text message from an unknown number. It simply said, "I know what you did." My heart skipped a beat, and a chilling sensation ran down my spine. How the hell did they find out? Who was this mysterious person? As I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to wrap my head around the situation, I realized that my revenge had unleashed something beyond my control. The person who reached out to me had the power to expose my role in Jake's downfall, and they seemed hellbent on bringing me down. The very thing I had fought so hard for had now become a ticking time bomb threatening to destroy everything I had built. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started to investigate the mysterious text sender, determined to find out who this person was and why they were so intent on bringing me down. I followed a trail of clues that eventually led me to a surprising conclusion. It turns out, the person behind the text was none other than Jake himself. He had somehow managed to get back into the country and was now hellbent on getting revenge on the person who had gotten him fired. Now, I'm in a race against time. I have to find a way to outsmart Jake and keep my involvement in his downfall a secret, or else I'm going to be in serious trouble. The danger intensifies, and the stakes have never been higher.